Mayne slicked the cobblestones of Covent Garden, glinting under the pale orange glow of street lamps still flickering in the early morning mist. The air carried the damp chill of a London winter, refusing to loosen its grip, and the usual bustle of commuters hadn't yet begun. That was what made it so unnatural. The silence. Hermione Granger stepped through the auror-guarded perimeter, her ministry badge clipped to her coat, breath curling in front of her like smoke. She paused just inside the cordon, her eyes scanning the scene. In the center of the square, embedded in the pavement as if etched by fire, was a sigil. 12 interlocking arcs forming a spiral, each line radiating faint tracers of ritual magic that shimmered like heat haze. It pulsed faintly, like a slow, sleeping heartbeat, and around it, frozen, a cyclist mid-pedal, body rigid, face locked in mild surprise, a woman clutching a steaming paper cup, droplets suspended in air beside it. The wizard in Muggle attire, one hand half-drawn from his coat, wand still sheathed, all encased in a transparent glassy film that wasn't quite solid, more like time itself had been stolen from them. "They've been like this since 5:30, said an auror, stepping forward. No signs of struggle, no magical traces we could identify. Just this. He gestured helplessly at the sigil. Hermione crouched, pulling on dragonhide gloves. This isn't stasis charm work. Too intricate, too deliberate. She traced the outer ring with her eyes, muttering under her breath. Old runic base, but hybridized. There's parcel tongue influence in the inner loop, and something else. Blood script, maybe. She reached into her satchel, pulling out a charcoal-tipped quill and a pad of enchanted parchment. As she began sketching, the lines shimmered faintly on the page, rearranging themselves into a more stable form. A diagnostic charm whispered from her wand tip. Star, Revelio Sigillum. Star, the sigil flared. The low hum vibrated through the ground, and the frozen figures twitched, just once, as if dreaming. Hermione jerked back, wand raised. Merlin's beard breathed. It did that 10 minutes ago, the auror said. We thought it might collapse, but no change in the victims. Hermione stood, brushing grit from her knees. This isn't a trap. It's a message, or a key. She turned to the auror. Has anyone touched it? Only the first responder. He's in St. Mungo's. Petrified. Same condition. She exhaled sharply. Then we don't touch it. Not until we understand the activation threshold. Her mind raced. Get me everything on ancient binding sigils, pre-Wandleton, preferably, and contact the Department of Mysteries. I want their arithmancers on this star, yesterday's star. Yes, Head Granger. She barely heard him. Her eyes were fixed on the spiral. There was something familiar in the curvature of the second arc, a pattern she'd seen once, years ago, in a restricted section text on pure blood inheritance rituals. She couldn't place it, but it unsettled her. A cold wind cut through the square, then footsteps, measured, unhurried, clicking against wet stone. Granger, still playing archaeologist, I see. She didn't need to turn to know that voice. Smooth, edged, with the same old condescension, though softer now, worn by time and reluctant maturity. Draco Malfoy stepped into the circle of aurors, his ministry cloak fastened at the throat, face pale under the gray morning light. He carried a rolled scroll tied with black ribbon. I was summoned, he said, not looking at her. Apparently my family's specialties are in demand again. Hermione turned slowly. You understand what this is? He glanced at the sigil. His expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the scroll. I know what its star shouldn't star be, he said quietly. This symbol, it's not supposed to exist anymore. It was sealed, by blood oath. She studied him. Then start talking, Malfoy, because people are frozen in time, and I don't care about old family secrets if they're killing people's star, now star, whomever. He met her gaze. For the first time, something like real fear flickered in his eyes. You don't understand what you're looking at, he said. This isn't just a sigil. It's a star-waking star. And if this one's active, he unrolled the scroll, then 12 more are coming, one for each house. The first leg of dawn bled across London, pale and hesitant, as Hermione Granger stepped over the chalk outline drawn by Muggle police. The air tasted of damp concrete and ozone, a sharp tang that clung to the back of her throat. Before her, A woman stood frozen mid-stride on the pavement outside King's Cross, one foot lifted, as though caught in a photograph, her expression caught between surprise and fear. Her skin had taken on a dull, metallic sheen, iron gray and unyielding to touch. The sigil pulsed faintly beneath her, etched into the tarmac in jagged, angular lines that seemed to shift when looked at directly, like a trick of the light. Hermione adjusted her gloves, muttering a diagnostic charm under her breath. The incantation fizzled against the symbol with a soft hiss, like water on hot stone. Nothing. Again she tried. Star finite, incantatum star. Then star raliotio star. Then a complex counter-sequence from the Department of Mystery's restricted archives. Each spell dissolved the moment it touched the sigil's edge, absorbed as if by a sponge. "They're not going to like this," a voice drawled from behind her. She didn't need to turn. The cadence, cool, clipped, laced with that old aristocratic boredom, was unmistakable. "Malfoy," she said, keeping her eyes on the victim. "I didn't think they'd send you until later. I'm not here for your convenience, Granger." Draco Malfoy stepped beside her, his ministry robes tailored to perfection, wand held loosely in one hand. He studied the sigil with a narrowed gaze, his pale fingers brushing the air just above the lines. "This isn't standard warding. It's not even modern sigil craft. This is older. Blood-based, maybe. I've seen something like it in my family's archives." Hermione turned to him sharply. "You've seen this before?" "Not exactly." He frowned, but the angular asymmetry, the way the lines converge at the apex, similar to the old pact scripts, pre-war. "Pre-Star, all Star Wars really," he hesitated. "My grandmother used to say they were cursed." "Cursed how?" "Anyone who tried to break them ended up part of them." He glanced at the woman. Seemed she wasn't exaggerating. A chill crept down Hermione's spine. She looked past the frozen figure to the street beyond. More chalk outlines now marked the pavement. 3 more victims in the last hour alone. 2 near Covent Garden, another in Soho. All caught mid-motion, all encased in the same iron-like stasis. Inside King's Cross, Muggle authorities buzzed with confusion. A train had been delayed. Passengers reported seeing weird shadows on the platform before the first victim appeared. Aurors in plain clothes moved discreetly among them, casting memory charms, fabricating stories about gas leaks and temporary paralysis. "It's spreading," Hermione murmured, "and we have no countermeasure." Malfoy crouched, tracing the sigil with his wand tip without touching it. "Whoever's doing this knows what they're doing. This isn't random. It's precise, ritualistic." "Then why leave no trace?" she asked. "No residue, no magical signature, no wand traces. It's like the sigil just appeared." "Maybe it did." He stood brushing dust from his sleeves. "Or maybe they're using something older than wands. Blood magic. Act magic. The kind that doesn't leave fingerprints, because it's written in the bones of the world." She stared at him. "That's not possible. Not at this scale." "Tell that to her," he said, nodding at the woman. A low hum began to vibrate beneath their feet. The sigil flared once cold blue-white light, and then dim. The woman's face twitched, just for a second. A flicker of awareness behind glass-like eyes. Hermione sucked in a breath. She's still conscious. Malfoy's jaw tightened. Then she's feeling every second of it. Somewhere across the city, another mark burned into the pavement. And another. And another. The Ministry was already calling it unbreakable stasis. But Hermione knew the truth. They weren't just trapped. They were being star-collected cast. Main tapped steadily against the high-arched windows of the Ministry's Department of Mysteries, a soft percussion beneath the low hum of enchanted ruins floating in glass orbs. Hermione's fingers traced the edge of a charred parchment spread across the long obsidian table, one of 12 recovered from the latest site, a cafe in Camden, where 7 Muggles had been found frozen mid-motion, their coffee still steaming, eyes wide but unseeing. The sigil carved into the floor pulsed faintly, a dull bronze light that faded every time she tried to scan it with her wand. She had been awake for 36 hours. Her robes were wrinkled, her hair a wild halo from constant tugging, and the cup of now cold tea beside her had long lost any charm to keep it warm. The research was going nowhere. Every reference to the symbol, a spiral with 3 inward-pointing thorns, like a wound in space, led to dead ends. Ancient wards, Yes, blood-based magic, likely. But nothing this precise, this potent. The door hissed open. She didn't look up. If that's another report from magical accidents, just leave it on the desk. I'm afraid I'm not here to deliver paperwork, Granger. The voice, cool, familiar, edged with that old, infuriating polish, made her spine stiffen. She lifted her eyes slowly. Draco Malfoy stood in the doorway, his ministry robes immaculate, silver buttons gleaming under the enchanted ceiling's dim glow. He carried a slender case of black wood under one arm, his expression unreadable. 10 years out of Hogwarts hadn't softened his features so much as refined them. Sharper jaw, colder eyes, but the same way of holding himself, like he owned the air around him. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice flat. "Same as you," he said, stepping inside. The door sealed shut behind him with a soft click. "The minister assigned me as liaison. Apparently my family's archives contain some, how did he put it? Unique resources relevant to your investigation." Hermione stared. "You're joking." He raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like I find this amusing?" She exhaled sharply, pushing back from the table. "This is my case. I've been leading the research since the first incident in Edinburgh. You can't just walk in here and—" "I'm not taking over," he interrupted, setting the case down with deliberate care. "I'm assisting, reluctantly, I might add. But the fact remains, the Malfoys were one of the few families who kept records on pre-founders' sigil work. Most of it's cursed, half-rotted, or written in blood ink, but it's there." Hermione crossed her arms. "And you're willing to share it? Just like that?" Draco's mouth twitched. Not quite a sneer, not quite a smile. "Let's say I have my own reasons for wanting this stopped. Those stasis fields, they're not just freezing people. They're draining something. Life force, magic, I'm not sure. But the pattern, it's similar to something my grandmother tried to warn us about. Before she died." That gave her pause. "What do you mean?" He opened the case. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay a series of thin, ivory tablets etched with symbols that shimmered when touched. "These are memory sigils. They don't record words. They record intent, emotion, power. Touch one, and you'll feel what the caster felt when they made it." Hermione stepped closer, wary. "And you're certain they're safe?" "No," he admitted. "But I wouldn't have brought them if I thought they'd kill you. Probably." She shot him a look. "I'm serious, Granger. This isn't about house pride or ancient grudges. Something is waking up, and if we don't figure out what these sigils are before the next cycle, midnight on the solstice, there won't be enough of London left to investigate." A silence settled between them, thick with unspoken history. She remembered the boy who called her a mudblood. He remembered the girl who punched him in the face. And now, here they stood, two of the most powerful minds in the ministry, bound by duty, suspicion, and the quiet fear that magic itself might be turning against them. "Show me," she said at last. Draco nodded and reached for the first tablet. Rain lashed against the high-arched windows of the ministry's restricted research annex, blurring the gaslit streets of London beyond into streaks of amber and gray. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old parchment, ink, and the faint metallic tang of enchanted seals. Hermione Granger stood at a long obsidian table, her fingers tracing the edge of a charred parchment fragment. It bore one of the sigils, a jagged, interlocking spiral surrounding a central eye-like glyph, scorched into the material as if burned by invisible fire. She had been here since dawn, cross-referencing ancient wards, sifting through forbidden grimoires smuggled from the Black family vault. The stasis victims, 12 now, 3 in Diagon Alley, 2 in Edinburgh, and 7 Muggles in Birmingham, remained frozen mid-motion, untouched but unresponsive, their skin cold and hard as iron. No spell reversed it, no potion thawed it. And the sigils, always the same, appeared without warning, etched into stone, pavement, even the bark of trees. The door creaked open. "You're early," she said, without turning, recognizing the measured stride, the whisper of tailored robes. "Punctuality is a virtue even you can't fault, Granger." Draco Malfoy's voice was cool, clipped, carrying the same aristocratic lilt that had grated against her ears since childhood. She finally turned, arms crossed. He stood just inside the doorway, silver blonde hair damp from the rain, his gray eyes scanning the room with practiced detachment. He wore dark green robes lined with silver thread, the mark of a ministry consultant, not a subordinate. That annoyed her more than it should have. "You've been briefed?" she asked. "Enough. 12 victims. No known countermeasure. Sigils tied to pre-Goblin rebellion's blood. Magic, possibly older. He stepped forward, gaze locking onto the parchment. And you've already touched it. Hermione stiffened. I wore gloves. Doesn't matter. These aren't wards, Granger. They're blood contracts. You don't star them. You invoke them. He pulled a thin leather-bound book from his inner robe and flipped it open. This one, the central spiral with the pupil glyph. This one, the central spirex. It's not a spell. It's a star receptor star. Does not matter. She frowned. A receptor for what? That's what we're supposed to find out, aren't we? He looked up, one pale eyebrow arched. Unless you'd rather keep poking at it like a first year with a cursed cauldron. Her jaw tightened. I've reviewed every known text on sigil magic in the Ministry archives, including the restricted ones. There's no precedent for this kind of mass activation. And yet here we are. He stepped closer, setting the book down. You're thinking like a scholar. I'm thinking like someone whose family carved these symbols into our cellar walls to keep enemies out, and ancestors in. That's barbaric. It's survival. His voice dropped, and right now survival might be the only thing keeping those people from turning to stone permanently. She exhaled sharply. So what do you suggest? Start with the victims. Where were they when it happened? What were they doing? These sigils don't choose randomly. They respond to intent, lineage, blood. Muggle victims. Draco. No magic in their lines. Exactly. He met her eyes. So why are they star-included star? The silence between them stretched, taut. The rain drummed harder against the glass. Hermione looked away first. I've already sent for their personal effects. Medical records. Anything that might show a connection. Good. He flipped a page in the book. But don't waste time on Muggle science. Look for star blood star. One birthmarks, injuries. Tattoos. Things they wouldn't report. Things hidden. She nodded slowly, though every instinct rebelled at taking advice from him. And if we find a pattern, then we follow it, even if it leads to families like mine. He paused. Especially then. She studied him, the tight set of his mouth, the shadows under his eyes. He wasn't just here for show. He believed this was real, dangerous. We'll need access to old family registries, she said. The pure blood genealogies. His lip twitched. Good luck getting those. Most were burned after the war. Not all, no, he said quietly. Not all. Another silence. Then, softer. We don't have to like each other, Granger, but we do have to trust the work. She looked at the sigil again, cold, hungry, ancient. I don't trust magic. I don't understand, she said. Then you're already behind. Rain slicked the cobbles of Diagon Alley, turning the ancient stones into dark mirrors that reflected the bruised twilight above. The usual hum of commerce had died hours ago, replaced by a hush broken only by the distant clatter of an outpost carrier and the occasional flicker of a malfunctioning street lamp. Hermione Granger pulled her cloak tighter, breath curling in pale wisps as she stepped past the shuttered windows of Flourish and Blots. The Ministry had summoned her just after midnight, an urgent dispatch marked with the seal of the Department of Mysteries. She turned down a narrow service lane behind Meltem, where a cluster of Aurors stood beneath a flickering gas lamp, their wands drawn. One of them, a young woman with sharp features and a silver badge glinting on her chest, nodded as Hermione approached. It's beneath the flagstones, the Auror said. We didn't see it until the rain washed the ground away. The wards didn't catch it either. It's quiet. But it's there. Hermione crouched, brushing aside the damp grit with gloved fingers. There, carved into the stone with unnerving precision, was a sigil unlike any she'd seen before. It spiraled inward like a vortex, its lines sharp and deliberate, etched with what looked like blackened iron. A faint, rhythmic pulse, like a slow heartbeat, thrummed beneath her fingertips. The air above it shimmered, warping the raindrops before they could land. It's active, she murmured. But not hostile, not yet. A shadow fell across the sigil. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Always chasing mysteries in the rain, Granger. How very Gryffindor of you. Draco Malfoy stood at the mouth of the alley, his pale hair pulled back, a dark traveling cloak wrapped around him. His wand was in hand but not raised, nearly held like a tool he expected to need. "I didn't think they'd send you," Hermione said, standing slowly. "They didn't." I volunteered. He stepped forward, boots clicking against wet stone. "This is old magic, older than Hogwarts. You'd be dancing in the dark without someone who's read the right family grimoires." She bit back a retort. He wasn't wrong. The sigil structure bore hallmarks of pre-petrificus traditions, runes that predated the statute of secrecy, used in blood-binding ceremonies and territorial wards. Her research had only scratched the surface. Malfoy knelt, ignoring the rain soaking into his trousers. He traced the outer edge of the sigil with the tip of his wand, murmuring under his breath. A soft silver light spilled from the wand's tip, coiling around the carvings like smoke. "This isn't just a ward," he said. "It's a key, or a lock. Possibly both." "A lock on what?" He glanced up, gray eyes catching the dim light. Something buried, or someone. A gust of wind sent the rain sideways, stinging Hermione's cheeks. She pulled out her own wand, casting a diagnostic charm. Star Revelio Sigillum. Star of the sigil flared briefly, lines glowing a deep crimson before fading. "It's linked," she said, "to the first one in London. Same energy signature. Same rhythm." Malfoy stood, brushing water from his sleeves. "Then we're not dealing with isolated incidents. This is a sequence. And if I'm right," he paused, gaze distant, "there are 7. On what basis? The old families, mine included, use septenary cycles in binding magic. 7 oaths, 7 seals, 7 bloodlines. Break one, and the chain fails. But complete it." He didn't finish. "Then what happens?" She pressed. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something unfamiliar in his expression. Not arrogance, not disdain, but something closer to unease. "Then something wakes up," he said quietly, "and I'd rather not be here when it does." The air in the Ministry's restricted research annex hummed with restrained magic, a low, almost imperceptible thrum that vibrated in Hermione's molars. Rows of sealed glass cases held artifacts too volatile for casual handling, cracked wands, cursed mirrors, a pair of gloves still twitching with residual intent. She stood over a stone slab etched with one of the sigils, its surface cool and dark as basalt, the lines glowing faintly now under the influence of her latest incantation. Her wand, precise and steady, moved in shallow arcs above the symbol. "Lumen astrar," she murmured, "secundum flumen occultum." A web of silver light flared into existence, branching outward from the sigil-like roots seeking water. Each thread pulsed, faintly blue at the core, veering now east, now south, as if pulled by an unseen tide. Hermione exhaled slowly. "There," she whispered, "the currents." "Then not random." Draco Malfoy leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his expression caught between skepticism and reluctant fascination. He'd arrived an hour late, predictably, but hadn't mocked her since. Not once. "That's not standard Ministry cartography," he said, stepping forward. His boots clicked softly against the flagstone floor. "You're mapping magical flow, not geography." "Exactly," Hermione replied, eyes still on the shimmering lines. "These sigils aren't just symbols. They're anchors. They're tapping into something older than the Ministry, older than Hogwarts even. Ley lines, conduits of natural magical energy that run beneath the earth. I've read about them in obscure texts, but never seen them activated like this." Draco crouched beside the slab, his pale fingers hovering just above the sigil's edge. "This pattern, it's similar to the Malfoy ancestral wards. Not identical, but the cadence, the way the lines spiral inward, it's familiar. My grandmother used to trace them during solstice rituals, said they spoke to the blood." Hermione glanced at him, brow furrowed. "Blood magic? You're not suggesting—" "I'm suggesting we don't jump to conclusions," he interrupted, voice cool. "But you're not the only one who's studied. The old families kept knowledge the Ministry buried. This," he gestured at the glowing threads, "this isn't just magic. It's language. And someone is speaking it fluently." She hesitated, then nodded. "The victims. They're not chosen at random. I cross-referenced the locations. Each sigil appeared at a convergence point, where 2 or more ley lines intersect. That's why the stasis is so stable. The magic isn't just holding them, It's feeding from the earth itself. Draco stood, brushing dust from his tailored robes. So we're not dealing with a rogue spellcaster. We're dealing with someone who understands the architecture of magical energy. Possibly someone who's been waiting for the lines to align. Literally, Hermione added, a chill creeping down her spine. The solstice is in 3 days. If these sigils are part of a larger design, whatever's coming, whatever they're trying to awaken, it'll happen then. Silence settled between them, thick with implication. The silver threads above the sigil flickered, one of them stretching further, thinning as it reached toward the northern wall. Hermione followed its path, eyes narrowing. That direction, it points toward the old Black Estate. Not just Grimmauld Place, the ancestral lands in Northumberland. There's a ruin there, Avalon's Hollow. Records say it was a meeting place for the old blood pacts. Draco's jaw tightened. My father mentioned it once, said it was sealed after the First Wizarding War. Too dangerous, too much power buried beneath it. She turned to him, urgency sharpening her voice. Then that's where we need to go. If these sigils are reactivating the lines, they're leading back to the source. And if someone's trying to reclaim that power, they won't be doing it alone, Draco finished. They'd need blood ties, old names, families like mine, like yours, if you trace it far enough. Hermione stiffened. I'm not part of any bloodline, aren't you? He asked softly. You'd be surprised what gets buried in history, and what rises when the earth begins to speak. The air in the ministry's restricted archives was thick with the scent of aged parchment and dried ink, a silence so deep it seemed to press against the eardrums. Hermione knelt beside a long obsidian table, her fingers tracing the edges of a translucent sigil imprint, lifted from a victim in Diagon Alley. The symbol shimmered faintly under lamplight, its lines sharp and unyielding, like veins of cold iron frozen in glass. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady the knot in her chest. 3 cities, London, Paris, Prague, 18 people, all frozen mid-step, untouched by time, their breath suspended, their eyes wide with silent terror. Across the table, Draco Malfoy stood motionless, his pale fingers hovering just above the sigil. His usual mask of detached arrogance had slipped, revealing something raw and unfamiliar. Recognition. This, he said, voice low, isn't just ancient, it's forbidden. Hermione looked up. Explain. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his tailored black robes and withdrew a small silver-handled dagger. She tensed. Relax, Granger. I'm not about to slit your throat in the archives. With careful precision, he drew the blade across the pad of his left thumb. A bead of blood, welled, dark, and glistening. Before she could protest, he smeared it across the surface of the sigil. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the symbol flared, not with light, but with a deep, resonant hum that made the bones in her jaw vibrate. The lines pulsed, shifting subtly, rearranging themselves into a new configuration. Hermione stumbled back, heart hammering. What in Merlin's name was that? Blood activation, Draco said, wiping his thumb on a cloth. Old magic. Very old. This script, it's not just archaic, it's Malfoy. She stared at him. Your family? Not just mine. He traced one of the newly revealed glyphs with his eyes, jaw tight. The knots, the rosiers, the Lestranges before they deluded themselves. This was used during the Sigil Wars, before the Statute of Secrecy, when pure blood families believed words written in blood and bone could bind reality itself. That's impossible, she whispered, though the evidence shimmered before her. It was outlawed after the blood schism of 1689, he continued. The ministry burned every text, erased every name. But some families kept the knowledge, in vaults, in bloodlines. And you know it? He turned to her, gray eyes sharp. My grandmother taught me, in whispers, at night. She called it the tongue of the ancestors, said it was our birthright. Hermione swallowed. The implications coiled like smoke through her thoughts. If Draco could read this, if others could, then the attacks weren't random. They were deliberate, targeted, and someone was using magic outlawed for centuries. Why would anyone bring this back now? Draco didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the table, his posture tense. Because it's not just about power, it's about purity, about reclaiming what was taken. And if this sigil is active, He paused. It means someone is calling back the old oaths, the blood pacts. She felt a chill, like the ones that bound families during a schism. Worse, he said quietly, the ones that required sacrifice. They stood in silence, the weight of history pressing down. Outside, the ministry bustled with oblivious life. But here, in the dim stillness, the past had cracked open like a tomb. Then Draco said, "There's something else." She turned. "This sigil, the way it's structured, it's not just a stasis charm, it's a vessel. It's holding something, or someone. Trapped. No." His voice dropped. Waiting. Hermione stared at the shimmering symbol, its lines now faintly glowing like embers in ash. And for the first time, she didn't see just a crime scene. She saw a message. And it was written in blood. The flickering glow of enchanted candles cast long, wavering shadows across the rows of ancient tomes, their spines cracked and titles faded by centuries of neglect. Dust hung in the air like suspended time, disturbed only by the quiet rustle of parchment and the occasional scratch of quill on paper. Hermione Granger rubbed her temples, the weight of the day pressing behind her eyes. She had been here since dusk, poring over forgotten grimoires and coded family ledgers, chasing the ghost of a pattern in the sigils that had begun appearing in London, Paris, even New York. Across the long oak table, Draco Malfoy leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. His usual air of detached superiority was dulled by fatigue, but his gaze remained sharp as he studied a particularly dense scroll unrolled before him. "This one," he murmured, tapping the edge of the parchment, "the inverted trident motif. It's not just decorative, it's a binding sigil, old knot family signature. I saw it in my grandfather's vault records." Hermione glanced up, frowning. "The knots? But they've been politically neutral for decades." "Neutral? Yes. Forgotten? No." Draco's voice was low, almost reverent. "Families like ours don't vanish. We retreat. Bide our time." She studied him for a moment. The faint shadows beneath his eyes, the way his usually immaculate hair had fallen into disarray. He looked less like the sneering boy from Hogwarts, and more like a man burdened by history. "You really believe that? That old bloodlines still hold power in the shadows?" "I don't believe it," he said, meeting her gaze. "I no star it. You wouldn't either, if your family hadn't burned its own records trying to prove loyalty to the New Order." Hermione stiffened. "My parents are Muggles. They didn't have records to burn." "No," he said quietly, "but the Ministry did. For every half-blood, every Muggle-born, there were notes, assumptions, predictions. The old families kept copies. Just in case." She exhaled sharply, turning back to her notes. "So we're not just hunting a spell, we're hunting memory." "Precisely." A silence settled between them, but it was different now. Less hostile, more contemplative. The kind of quiet that comes when two people realize they're standing on the same precipice, looking into the same abyss. Hermione flipped a page, her fingers brushing a charcoal rubbing of one of the stasis sigils found near Diagon Alley. "This loop here, it's not in any of the standard lexicons. Not modern, not even in Star Moste Potentiae Potions Star." Draco pushed his chair forward, leaning across the table. "Let me see." She slid the parchment over. He studied it, then reached into the inner pocket of his cloak and withdrew a small silver stylus, thin, etched, with fine runes. With careful precision, he traced the outer ring of the sigil on a fresh sheet of parchment. The air hummed faintly, and the lines glowed a soft silver before fading. "It's a ward," he said. "But not defensive. It's a star recall star mechanism, like a blood memory trigger." "A what?" "Some families, very old ones, used to bind spells to ancestral lines. If a descendant broke a pact, the magic would activate. Not to punish. To star remind star." Hermione's breath caught. "You're saying these people aren't just victims. They're heirs?" Draco didn't answer immediately. He stared at the fading glow on the parchment, his expression unreadable. "It's possible. The stasis, it's not killing them. It's preserving them, like they're waiting for something. Or someone." The candlelight flickered again, and for a moment the shadows on the wall seemed to shift into shapes, arcans, columns, a great hall buried beneath time. Hermione whispered, "What if it's not an attack? What if it's a summons?" Draco looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, there was no sarcasm, no mask. Only the quiet acknowledgement of shared understanding. "Then we're not the hunters," he said. "We're the ones being called." Rain lashed against the high-arched windows of the long gallery, each gust of wind rattling the ancient panes like a warning. The room deep within the oldest wing of the Ministry's Department of Mysteries had not been used in over a century. Stone pillars carved with forgotten runes flanked the long obsidian table, where 10 representatives of the oldest wizarding bloodline sat in rigid silence. Their robes were not the standard ministry gray but rich old-world fabrics, dark emerald, blood crimson, silver-threaded black, each bearing the sigil of their house stitched over the heart. Hermione stood at the foot of the table, her fingers pressed lightly against a dossier of parchment, her knuckles pale. She had studied every lineage, every treaty, every whispered scandal in the archives, but nothing had prepared her for this. The weight of centuries pressing down in the form of cold stares and unreadable expressions. A chill ran through the room that no warming charm could touch. Then the doors opened. Draco Malfoy entered with a measured stride, his silver-blonde hair pulled back, his expression composed. He wore no house colors, only charcoal wool with a discreet serpent clasp at the collar. Heads turned. A few murmurs slithered through the room like snakes through dry grass. "Mr. Malfoy," said Lady Greengrass, her voice like cracked ice, "we were not informed you would be acting as liaison." "And yet," Draco replied, taking a seat to Hermione's right, "the minister deemed it prudent. Given that half this council still refuses to acknowledge the Department of Magical Law Research as legitimate authority, someone must speak the old tongue, and know when not to." A few faces flushed. Orion Knott shifted in his chair, fingers drumming once against the table before stilling. Hermione glanced at Draco, surprised. There was no smirk, no arrogance, only a quiet command that seemed to settle over the room like a veil. She had expected him to strut, to gloat in his environment, but instead he sat like a blade sheathed, dangerous, but controlled. She cleared her throat. "Thank you for attending. As you know, the sigils appearing in Muggle and magical spaces alike are not random. They're constructed from a blend of high warding script and sacrificial binding, elements not seen since the Pact of 13. Silence. Then, from the far end, Lady Selwyn, ancient and draped in black lace, spoke. "And why should we believe you've interpreted them correctly, Miss Granger? You are no bloodseer, no line-holder. You read books. We remember blood." Hermione met her gaze. "I read the evidence, and the evidence says 12 people are frozen in time, Muggle and wizard, marked with sigils that trace back to your family's ancestral wards." "Coincidence or provocation?" snapped Knott. Draco leaned forward slightly, or memory. His voice was low, deliberate. "The sigils matched the ones carved into the gates of the Hollow Court during the Sundering, the night the old pacts were broken. You all know this. Denying it won't stop the next occurrence." A ripple led through the table. "You speak as if you still claim lineage," said Greengrass, eyes narrowing. "I speak as the only one here who's read the original oaths," Draco countered, "and the only one willing to admit our ancestors made promises they didn't keep. The stasis isn't a curse. It's a reckoning." Hermione stared at him. She had spent years believing Draco Malfoy was nothing more than a relic of a dying world. Proud, insular, cruel. But now, in the flickering candlelight, he looked like something else entirely. A man standing between two eras, trying to prevent both from collapsing. A silence stretched, thick and fragile. Then, slowly, Lady Selwyn placed a withered hand on the table. "There was a 13th sigil," she said. "Ours was not among those displayed. It was erased." Draco exhaled. "Then someone's finishing what was started, and if we don't remember the truth before the next mark appears, it won't be stasis next time. It will be oblivion." Hermione looked down at her notes, her mind racing, but beneath the fear, something quieter stirred. Not trust, not yet, but the barest thread of understanding. Rain slicked the cobbles of Diagon Alley, turning the stones into dark mirrors that reflected the bruised sky above. The air smelled of wet parchment and burnt copper, a tang that clung to the back of Hermione's throat as she hurried forward, her boots clicking sharply against the stone. Ahead, a crowd had gathered near Gringotts, held back by a shimmering barrier of emerald light. Beyond it, the great bronze doors stood sealed, fused shut by a sigil carved into the steps, its lines deep and glowing faintly silver, like cooled mercury. She stopped just short of the barrier, breath-catching. The sigil was different this time, larger, more intricate. 3 interlocking circles, each threaded with runes she didn't recognize, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat, as if breathing. "Merlin's beard," she whispered. "Granger." The voice came from behind, smooth and measured. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Malfoy." She kept her eyes on the sigil. "You're late. I was detained by a rather insistent gnome in my conservatory. Apparently it has a claim on my begonias." He stepped beside her, his cloak damp at the shoulders, his expression unreadable. "Let me guess. No one's touched it." "No. One Auror tried." His hand froze halfway to the sigil. "Took 2 healers and a blood-warming charm to break the stasis." She glanced at him. "Sound familiar?" He didn't answer at first. His pale eyes traced the pattern, lingering on the central rune, the spiraled glyph that seemed to twist under the gaze. "This isn't just old magic. It's Star Family star magic. Bloodbound. Only someone with lineage from the original signers could disrupt it without consequence." "And you're telling me you recognize it?" "Parts of it. The outer ring. It's Malfoy. Or was, centuries ago. But the others." He frowned. "One's black, the other. I don't know. But it's familiar, like something from a dream." Hermione's stomach tightened. "So someone's using ancient blood magic, tied to noble houses, to paralyze people and shut down key magical institutions. That's not just sabotage. That's a message. A declaration," Draco corrected quietly. "And the goblins aren't going to like being the heralds of it." As if on cue, a sharp, guttural voice cut through the rain. Griphook stood atop the bank's marble steps, flanked by armed guards, their spears tipped with jagged obsidian. His red eyes burned with fury. "You call this security," he spat, addressing the small group of ministry officials huddled near the barrier. "Your laws fail, your R's falter, and now your ancestors' ghosts carve spells on our doorstep. Gringotts will not be a stage for your civil wars." Hermione stepped forward. "Griphook, we're doing everything we can. You're slow and weak." He turned his gaze on Draco. "And you, blood of the line that once swore oaths to our vaults, you bring this curse back to our steps." "You shame your name." Draco didn't flinch. "I didn't carve it, but I'll help unmake it, if you'll let us." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant roll of thunder. Then Griphook spat on the stone. "You have 12 hours. After that, Gringotts closes. No loans, no exchanges, no cooperation with the ministry, until this abomination is lifted." The crowd murmured. Hermione felt the weight of it, the economic ripple already beginning. No goblin banking meant no international trade, no access to ancestral vaults, no funding for reconstruction efforts. Panic would follow. She turned to Draco. 12 hours. He met her gaze, his jaw tight. "Then we'd better start digging up the past and pray it doesn't dig back." The candle flames didn't flicker. They stood rigid like frozen tons of gold, casting sharp, unwavering shadows across the ministry's restricted archives. Hermione knelt beside one of the sigils etched into a slab of black basalt, replica of course, but unsettlingly accurate. Its lines were unnervingly precise, angular in a way no modern charm would produce, and cold to the touch even through her gloves. "It's not just a ward," Draco said, his voice low, almost reverent. He stood a few paces back, arms crossed, pale eyes tracing the sigil's edges. "It's a binding, a sentence written in iron." Hermione glanced up, frowning. "Iron? That's absurd. Iron disrupts magic. It's antithetical." "Exactly," he said, stepping forward. He didn't kneel, but crouched slightly, one hand hovering just above the stone. "That's what makes it so rare, so feared. Iron magic isn't about weaving spells. It's about suppression. It uses iron not as a material but as a principle. Rigidity, finality, resistance. The sigil doesn't channel magic. It stops it, freezes it mid-flow." She studied his profile, the tension in his jaw. "And you know this? How?" He didn't look at her. "My grandmother. She kept scrolls no one was supposed to see, buried them beneath the west wing, warded with blood seals. I was 12 when I found them, thought they were curse diagrams. Turns out they were warnings." Hermione stood slowly, brushing dust from her robes. So you're telling me this is ancient Malfoy family knowledge? Something your ancestors used? Not used, he corrected, finally meeting her gaze. Survived. My great-uncle was caught in one during the Purge of '89. Not cursed at all. Just stopped. Heart beating, breathe shallow, but frozen in time. Like a painting. They couldn't break it. Not with cutting spells. Not with blood incantations. Nothing. He stayed like that for 3 years, until the sigil expired, if that's even the right word. She swallowed. And the victims now, same symptoms. No magical signature, no trace of spell residue. Just cold, immobility, as if their magic has been caged. Hermione turned back to the sigil, her mind racing. But iron disrupts magic. How can you build a spell on something that nullifies power? Draco exhaled, a thin breath that fogged the air, despite the room's warmth. You don't build with it, you bind with it. The sigil isn't powered by wand magic. It's inscribed with iron-tipped styluses, under a new moon, using syllables from the old northern tongue, runes that mean halt, cease, still. It's not cast, it's declared. That's not magic, she murmured. That's decree. In a way, yes, he said. It imposes a law on reality, not let this happen, but this will not happen. And because iron represents the absence of change, the sigil becomes a fixed point. And not in time and magic both. She shivered, though the archives were warm. Who would even know how to do this? This isn't just obscure. It's extinct. Not extinct, he said quietly. Just buried. There were families, old ones, older than mine, who swore oaths during the Founder's Schism. Blood pacts sealed with iron oaths. They rejected wand magic altogether, called it the sorcerer's whim. They believed true power was in restraint, in stillness, and now someone's using it to paralyze people, Hermione said, voice tight. In Diagon Alley, in King's Cross, Muggles and wizards alike. Draco nodded. Whoever's doing this isn't just powerful. They're making a statement. This isn't random. Iron magic doesn't work on just anyone. It targets those with strong magical cores, wizards, seers, even powerful Muggle-borns with latent resonance. It's selective, purposeful. She looked at him, really looked. Not at the boy she'd hated, not at the man her world distrusted, but at someone who carried secrets like scars. You're afraid, she said. He didn't deny it. I'm afraid they're not just binding people. I'm afraid they're waking something up. Rain lashed against the high arched windows of the Department of Mysteries, each drop sounding like a whispered secret against the enchanted glass. Inside the restricted sigil chamber, the air hummed with restrained power, thick with the scent of old parchment, crushed moonstone, and something sharper, ozone, like the breath before lightning strikes. Hermione stood over the chalk-drawn replica of the sigil, her fingers tracing the knotted lines with a focus that made her shoulders ache. Across the circle, Draco leaned against a stone plinth, his wand tip glowing faintly as he murmured in low, sibilant tones, the old cadence of House Malfoy's ancestral tongue. They'd been at it for 12 hours. It's not just Latin or Aramaic, Hermione said, voice tight. There's a binding syntax here, layered, like a charm wrapped inside a curse, wrapped inside a ward. Draco exhaled through his nose, stepping forward. You're thinking it's recursive. Yes. And that means the release isn't a counter-charm. It's a reversal of sequence, like unweaving a tapestry thread by thread. He studied her for a moment, gray eyes reflecting the dim blue light. You're saying we have to speak it backwards. Not just the words, the intent. She nodded. The victim isn't frozen. They're suspended in a loop of time, held by the sigil's echo. Break the echo, break the hold. Draco's jaw tightened. And if we get it wrong, then we risk collapsing the temporal pocket. He could dissolve, or worse, wake up decades older. They both turned to the center of the room, where a young Muggle man stood, encased in a shimmering metallic sheen, not quite silver, not quite stone. His face was calm, eyes open, but unseeing, frozen mid-step. He'd been like this for 3 days, caught in a street in Diagon Alley, when the sigil flared to life beneath his feet. Draco reached into his inner robe and pulled out a small obsidian dagger, ancient, its hilt carved with serpentine spirals. Hermione stiffened. Where did you get that? A family heirloom. It focuses intent. For blood magic. She narrowed her eyes. We're not using blood. No, he said quietly. But we are using legacy. And mine happens to understand this language better than your textbooks ever will. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But no incantations I don't understand. No hidden clauses. Wouldn't dream of it, Granger. They took their positions at opposite ends of the sigil, wands raised. Draco began, voice low and resonant, speaking the sigil's original activation phrase, not to cast it, but to awaken its resonance. The lines on the floor flared crimson, then cooled to a dull iron hue. Hermione closed her eyes, listening, not to the words, but to the rhythm, the spaces between them. Then, softly at first, she began to speak. Backwards. Not just the syllables, but the emotion, the arc of power. She reversed not only the spell, but the will behind it, turning capture into release, stillness into motion. The air shivered. The man's fingers twitched. Draco joined her, his voice weaving with hers. The obsidian dagger now pressed to his palm. Not cutting, but drawing on the ancestral memory in his blood. The sigil pulsed, groaned, like stone under pressure. Then, a crack. A hairline fracture spread across the metallic sheen enveloping the man. Another light, real light, not magical, spilled through. He gasped. His knees buckled. Hermione lunged forward, catching him before he hit the floor. His breath came in ragged bursts, his eyes wide, darting. We're right. It's all right, she whispered. You're safe. You're free. Behind her, Draco lowered his wand, breathing hard. He stared at the shattered sigil, now dark and inert. We did it, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Hermione looked up at him, her own heart pounding. We did. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she saw something in Draco Malfoy's eyes that wasn't pride or bitterness or guarded contempt. It was wonder, and in that moment the weight of the past, the taunts, the war, the years of silence, didn't vanish. But it shifted, just enough. Rain lashed against the windows of St. Mungo's 7th floor, where the air hummed with restrained magic and the faint scent of burnt parchment. Hermione stood beside the hospital bed, her fingers hovering just above the unconscious man's forearm. The sigil was still there, faded, like old ink bleached by time, but unmistakable. It coiled around his wrist in jagged, angular lines, a language older than Hogwarts, older than the Ministry itself. He woke for 3 minutes this morning, Healer Pinterp said, adjusting his spectacles. Repeated the same phrase, the door opens twice. Then he collapsed again. We've stabilized him, but the magic, it's not healing. It's embedded. Hermione exhaled slowly, pressing her lips together. Embedded how? Like iron in the soul, the healer replied. The stasis didn't just freeze his body, it left a trace. A scar, not physical, not exactly. But if you look with the right spell, star vulnera animus star, you can see it. Like a crack in glass. She turned to the foot of the bed, where Draco Malfoy stood with his arms crossed, pale eyes scanning the sigil with an expression caught between disdain and reluctant fascination. He hadn't spoken since arriving, but she could feel his mind working, the quiet gears of old knowledge turning behind that sharp, guarded face. Well? She asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Does it mean anything to you? He stepped forward, boots silent on the tile floor. It's not in any of the Malfoy grimoires I've seen, he said, but the structure, the symmetry. It's similar to the wards my grandmother used to cast during the Blood Moon rites. Forbidden, of course, even then. Blood Moon rites? Hermione frowned. I've never heard of them. No, you wouldn't have, he said, glancing at her. They were rituals for binding oaths, soul oaths, not just promises. They tied magic to memory, to identity. Break the oath, and the sigil would consume you. Slowly, she looked back at the man on the bed, his breathing shallow, veins faintly pulsing with a bluish hue. You're saying this sigil did more than trap him? It's part of him now? Draco didn't answer at first. Instead, he drew his wand, pale Yule, unyielding, and murmured a spell under his breath. A thin silver light spilled from the tip, washing over the man's arm. The sigil flared. just for a second. And beneath it, like veins of dark metal beneath skin, a network of fine lines spread up his forearm, branching like roots. Hermione stepped back. That's not possible. It's possible, Draco said quietly. Someone didn't just freeze him. They branded him with a soul mark. She felt a chill crawl up her spine. Why? What kind of magic does that? The kind that erases free will, he said. The kind that turns people into vessels. This isn't just about fear, Granger. It's about control. A silence settled between them, thick and heavy. Outside, thunder growled like a caged beast. Healer Pinthrop shifted uncomfortably. We've scanned 12 victims so far. All show the same residual trace. We didn't notice it at first, too subtle, but now it's spreading, faintly, like corrosion. Hermione's jaw tightened. Spreading. How? We don't know, but the ones who've been released, their magic is weaker, unstable, as if something's leeching it. Draco's gaze darkened. Then they're not free, not really. The stasis broke, but the mark remains, and if it's spreading, it's still active, she finished. This isn't over. He met her eyes, and for the first time there was no sarcasm, no old bitterness, only the grim understanding of two people who had seen too much magic twist into something cruel. We need to find the source, he said, before the marks start waking up. Rain tapped a slow, insistent rhythm against the stained glass of the Malfoy ancestral hall, each drop distorting the faded crimson and silver sigils embedded in the leaded panes. Hermione stepped across the threshold, her boots clicking on black marble veined with white like fractured ice. The air smelled of old parchment, beeswax, and something fainter, myrrh, perhaps, or dried herbs left too long in a sealed drawer. A house elf in a threadbare pillowcase bowed low and vanished, silent as a shadow. Draco stood near the hearth, arms folded, his pale hair catching the low glow of candlelight. He didn't turn as she entered. "You're late," he said. "I had reports to file. Unlike some, I don't have the luxury of simply vanishing from the ministry." He turned then, gray eyes cool and assessing. "You're not welcome here, Granger. Not really. So if you're going to make this harder than it needs to be, we might as well leave now." "I'm not here for a tea party," she snapped. "I'm here for answers. Those sigils, the ones petrifying people like statues, they're rooted in blood magic. Old blood magic. And you and I both know your family has kept more than a few secrets buried in this mausoleum." He gave a tight smile. "Flattering. But the Malfoys aren't the only ones with ancestral grudges and dusty books." "No," she said, lowering her voice, "but you're the only ones who still perform the old rites during a winter solstice. I read the report from the Weisengamot archives. Your father refused to swear on modern oaths, always the blood vow. And your grandmother's portrait still speaks in Parseltongue when agitated." Draco's jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean we're responsible. It means you know things the rest of us were never taught," she said. "And right now that makes you useful." A door creaked open down the corridor. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, approached. Then came the scent of lavender, and something metallic, like old coins. An elderly woman appeared, draped in dark velvet robes, her white hair coiled tightly at the nape of her neck. Narcissa Malfoy regarded Hermione with a gaze as still as frozen water. "Draco," she said, voice soft but edged with steel, "you did not tell me your guest would be so conspicuous." "Mother," Draco said, inclining his head, "Hermione Granger is here under official ministry sanction. We're investigating the recent disturbances." Narcissa's lips thinned. "Disturbances? How kind to call them that. My sister Andromeda's granddaughter was found in one of those cursed circles yesterday, frozen mid-step, like a doll in a shop window." Hermione's breath caught. "She's a victim?" "She is," Narcissa said, "and yet you still look at me as if I might be the one who cast the spell." "I don't. You do." Narcissa stepped forward, her cane tapping once on the floor. "You see bloodlines and assume corruption. You see tradition and call it tyranny. But you know nothing of the pacts we kept, the sacrifices made in silence to protect what little magic remained untouched by ministry meddling." Hermione swallowed. "I'm not here to judge the past. I'm trying to stop people from being trapped in stasis. The sigils, they resemble the warding marks used in the Black family grimoires. I believe they've been twisted, corrupted." Narcissa's eyes flickered just for a moment. "And you think we hold the key? I think you might know who does." Silence stretched. The fire crackled. Outside, thunder rolled across the moors. Then Narcissa turned and glided toward the inner hole. "Come," she said without looking back. "If you're so eager to play archaeologist, then let us see what the past has buried for you to unearth." Draco exchanged a glance with Hermione. Wary, charged, before following. The walls seemed to lean in as they walked, portraits whispering in hushed voices behind gilded frames. And deep in the bowels of the estate, beneath layers of enchantment and centuries of silence, something ancient stirred. Rain lashed against the stained glass of the ministry's sub-level archives, distorting the dim electric bulbs into smears of yellow across the damp stone walls. Hermione's fingers trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of the scroll in her hands, its edges frayed with age, ink shimmering faintly under her wandlight. The sigil drawn there pulsed once, as if breathing. "It's not just a ward," she whispered, more to herself than to Draco. "It's a conduit, a bridge." Draco stood a few paces behind, his back pressed to the doorframe, gray eyes scanning the corridor beyond. His wand was out, tip glowing a steady blue. "Then someone's been crossing it, and they're not done." She turned to him, frustration sharpening her voice. "You said your family's records didn't mention anything like this." "I said," he replied, voice low and measured, "that the ones I was allowed to read didn't." His jaw tightened. "There are texts locked behind blood seals, even I can't break." "But this—" He stepped forward, peering at the scroll. "This isn't just old magic. It's star-forbidden star magic, the kind they used during the blood schism, before they outlawed ancestral binding." A gust of wind howled down the corridor, though no window was open. The candles flickered, then died. Hermione's breath caught. That wasn't natural. Before Draco could answer, a low hum filled the air, like stone vibrating beneath a cauldron. The sigil on the scroll flared, crimson light spreading across the parchment, then leaping to the floor. Lines of fire etched themselves into the stone, forming a perfect circle around them both. "No," Draco hissed, grabbing her arm. "Don't move." Too late. The circle sealed, and the world twisted. The walls blurred, the ceiling stretched, and suddenly they weren't in the archives anymore. They stood in a narrow alley, wet cobbles underfoot, the stench of damp brick, and something metallic in the air. London, maybe, but not their London. The sky was wrong. 2 moons hung low, one pale and cracked, the other dark with veins of gold. Hermione staggered, clutching her head. "We've been displaced, not just in space, in star phase, star, phase star." Draco's face was ashen, but his grip on his wand never wavered. "This is the in-between, the space between worlds, where old magic sleeps. If we don't find the anchor sigil and break it within 12 hours, we'll be erased, our magic unraveled, our bodies left behind as husks." She stared at him. "You star knew star this could happen. I star suspected star, assesses." He snapped, "But you were the one who touched the scroll without a containment charm. I didn't know it was linked to a trap this sophisticated. Clearly your research missed a few centuries of blood magic." They glared at each other, the tension thick as fog, until a sound cut through the silence, whispering. Hundreds of voices, overlapping, speaking in a language that slithered between comprehension. Draco turned, back to back with her. "They're coming." "Who?" "The ones who left the sigils. The ones who want this world unmade." Hermione swallowed, drawing her wand. Her mind raced through incantations, countercharms, anything that might work in a realm not bound by known magical law. But here spells didn't always obey. A figure emerged from the mist, tall, robed in black scales, that shifted like oil, face hidden beneath a hood lined with silver thread. In its hands a staff carved with the same sigil from the scroll. Draco murmured, "Don't let it complete the chant." The figure raised the staff. They moved as one. Hermione cast star, expulso star, not at the figure, but at the cobbles beneath its feet. The explosion threw the creature back, but it landed smoothly, untouched. Draco followed with star Morseward star, not the dark mark, but an older curse, one that split the air with a serpent of black flame. It coiled around the staff, and for a moment the sigil dimmed. We need to shatter the connection, Hermione said, heart pounding. Break the staff. They charged. The creature hissed, and the ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a chasm filled with whispering faces. Hermione stumbled, but Draco yanked her back, his hand gripping hers like iron. You're not dying here, Granger. Not on my watch. She looked at him, really looked. Not the boy who mocked her in school, not the man who stood silent at his father's trials, but someone burdened by legacy, by secrets, by the weight of a name he couldn't escape. And in that moment something shifted. They lunged together. Hermione aimed for the staff's base, muttering an anti-entropic hex she'd once found in a Bulgarian grimoire. Draco slashed his wand in a spiral, invoking a Malfoy blood ward. Ancient, costly, but effective. The staff shattered. The world screamed. And then, silence. Rain lashed against the high arched windows of the Ministry's restricted archives, each drop striking like a whisper against glass thick with age and enchantment. The air inside was stale, layered with the scent of old parchment and iron filings, a metallic tang that clung to the back of Hermione's throat. She stood before a narrow oak shelf, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed the spine of a book bound in what looked like charred leather. It didn't have a title, no author, just a single sigil embossed in dull silver, the same mark that had begun appearing on city walls, on stone steps, even on the foreheads of the frozen victims. "Don't touch it bare-handed," Draco said from behind her, his voice low, almost reverent. He stepped forward, a black velvet pouch in one hand. "That's not just ink on that cover. That's star-dried blood star. Granger, human, possibly elf. You touch it without protection, and it might just start writing your star name in it." She pulled back, heart stuttering. "You're sure?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he knelt, placing the pouch on the floor, and drawing out a set of silver-tipped tongs and a pair of dragonhide gloves. "My grandmother used to say this book was never meant to be star found star, only star, remembered star, the Bud Ledger, that lists every family who ever signed the Iron Pacts. Magic so old it predates Hogwarts. Magic that binds life to power." Hermione swallowed. "And the Malfoys are in it?" Draco paused, his fingers hovering over the gloves. "Yes," he said, softer than she expected. "We are." Carefully, he lifted the book with the tomes and placed it on a stone lectern lined with anti-curse wards. A faint hum rose from the pages as they cracked open, the parchment yellowed and brittle, yet pulsing with a slow, rhythmic warmth. Names scrolled across the pages, some faded, some bold, others violently crossed out, with what looked like dried crimson strokes. "There," Draco said, pointing with the tongs to a section near the middle. "House Malfoy, signed in the year of the Hollow Moon, under the oath of unbroken lineage and silent service." Hermione leaned in, her breath catching. The ink wasn't static. The name Star, Malfoy, Star shimmered, and beneath it, smaller names appeared. Ancestors, rearised, generations linked by blood and vow. And then, faint but unmistakable, a newer line began to form, as if being written in real time. "Star Draco Lucius Malfoy. Star." She looked up at him. "It's updating." He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. "That means the pact still considers me bound, even after everything. The war, my father's disgrace, my own refusal to follow the old ways. It doesn't care about repentance, only blood." A cold silence settled between them. The rain outside slowed. The book, as if sensing their stillness, began to whisper. A chorus of voices, too faint to understand, speaking in a language that prickled against the skin. "This isn't just a list," Hermione murmured. "It's Star Alive Star, and it's choosing now to reveal itself." "Why?" Draco turned a brittle page with the tongs. "War names, the Greengrasses, the Lestranges, the Selwyns, all pure blood families. Yes, but not all Death Eaters. Some had remained neutral, some had even aided the Order. Not loyalty," he said. "Lineage. It's not about who fought for Voldemort. It's about who still carries the old magic in their veins. Whoever's activating the sigils, they're calling in the debts. The ledger isn't just a record, it's a contract. And if someone starts enforcing it, then everyone on this list could be at risk." Hermione finished. "Or worse, being used." A sudden gust rattled the window. The book snapped shut with a sound like a bone breaking. The sigil on the cover glowed once, a deep, pulsing red, and then faded. Draco exhaled slowly, We need to get this to Shacklebolt. Now, before someone else tries to collect on one of these pacts." Hermione nodded, but as she stepped back, she glanced at him, really looked at him, and saw not the smug boy from school, nor the guarded man from ministry meetings, but someone standing at the edge of a legacy he never asked for, yet could not escape. "Draco," she said quietly, "if this thing claims you're bound, what happens if you break it?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was bare, stripped of pride. "Blood magic doesn't forgive. It collects, always." The fire in the hearth of the restricted archives crackled low, casting long, trembling shadows across the spines of ancient tomes that hadn't been touched in centuries. Dust motes swirled in the dim candlelight, disturbed only by the soft turn of a page. Hermione sat cross-legged on the stone floor, her back against a shelf. A parchment scroll unfurled across her knees. Her fingers traced the edge of a sigil etched in faded crimson ink, a spiral bound by 3 interlocking rings, nearly identical to the ones appearing on the streets of London and Hogsmeade. Across from her, Draco stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the moonlit courtyard below. He hadn't spoken in nearly 20 minutes, not since they'd confirmed the sigil's presence in the Malfoy family's private grimoire, one he'd smuggled out under the pretense of academic interest. "You don't have to say anything," Hermione said quietly, not looking up. "But if you know something, if your family's history with this goes deeper than what's written, now's the time." Draco exhaled through his nose, a short, humorless sound. He turned slowly, leaning one shoulder against the stone frame. "You think I'd keep information that endangers people? Even now?" "I think," she said, finally meeting his gaze, "that you've spent your whole life learning when to stay silent." He looked away. Silence stretched thick and heavy. Then, almost too softly to hear, he began. "My grandmother, not Narcissa, Druella. She used to bind my wrists with chalk when I was 7, not to hurt me, to teach me." Hermione's breath caught. "Bind you?" It was a ritual, a test. She drew the first sigil on the nursery floor, the same one on the victims. Said it would show if I was worthy. Worthy of what? To inherit the blood script. The real one. Not the diluted nonsense the ministry calls. Heritage magic. Real power. Ancient. Unregulated. Forbidden now, of course. Hermione's fingers tightened on the scroll. "And were you?" He gave a bitter half-smile. "I failed." The sigil flared red. Rejection. She didn't speak to me for a month. Said the Malfoy line was weakening. That I carried shame in my blood. That's barbaric. "Is it?" He pushed off the wall, stepping closer. "You grew up believing magic was earned, studied for, proven. But in families like mine, magic was never about effort. It was about birthright, blood purity, legacy. The sigils, they were supposed to awaken that legacy, to call forth what was already there, if you were pure enough. And if you weren't, then the magic takes you instead." He paused. "That's what's happening now, the stasis. It's not a curse, it's a failed awakening. The sigils are searching for a worthy vessel. When they don't find one, they lock the body, preserve it, like a failed resurrection." Hermione stared at him. "You're saying these people aren't cursed?" "They're being tested and failing," he said, "just like I did." She studied his face, the tightness around his mouth, the guarded pain in his eyes. For the first time she saw not the arrogant boy from school, nor the guarded ministry liaison, but a man haunted by something he'd never chosen. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because someone is trying to restart the script. And they're using the old markers, blood, lineage, ancient oaths. Someone thinks they've found a vessel, or they're trying to force one into existence. And the Malfoys, my father destroyed most of the records after the war. But Druella, she kept secrets, hidden beneath the East Wing. I found the vault once, warded with blood magic. I didn't open it. I was afraid of what it might prove about me." Hermione stood, brushing dust from her robes. "Then we need to find that vault." He looked at her, startled. "You'd help me do that. I'd help stop innocent people from being trapped in magical limbo," she said, stepping closer. "But Draco, if your family's past is tied to this, if there are oaths or alliances we don't know about—" "I'll tell you everything," he said, voice low. "Even the parts I've spent years pretending weren't true." The fire flickered. Somewhere in the depths of the ministry, a clock struck midnight, and in that quiet between them, something shifted. Not trust, Not yet, but the fragile beginning of understanding. Rain lashed the towers of Hogwarts, streaking the ancient stone with silver threads under a bruised twilight sky. The air inside the east corridor tasted of ozone, and something older, dank, metallic, like blood on stone. Hermione pressed her palm against the cold wall, her fingers tracing the sharp angles of the sigil carved into the very bows of the castle. It pulsed faintly, a slow, rhythmic throb that made her molars ache. This one was different, larger, deeper. 3 concentric circles, each etched with runes that twisted like serpents, spiraling inward toward a single, hollow eye at the center. The magic here wasn't just foreign. It was invasive. It had clawed its way through the school's protective wards as if they were parchment. "They found it during evening patrol," said Professor Trelawney, hovering behind her with a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her voice trembled. 2 fourth years, Petra and Cedric, were just standing, frozen, like statues. She lowered her voice. "Their eyes, they're open, but there's no one home." Hermione exhaled slowly, pressing her wand to the outermost ring. Lumos reflecta. The beam fractured, splintering into jagged shards that twisted away from the symbol, repelled. She frowned. "It's repelling diagnostic spells, and it's anchored to the castle's core, probably the foundation stones. That's why the wards flickered." A sharp voice cut through the corridor. "Granger. Still poking at things you don't understand." She didn't turn. "Malfoy, how kind of you to arrive after the crisis." Draco stepped into view, his ministry robes impeccably tailored, his pale hair slicked back, despite the storm. He studied the sigil, his gray eyes narrowing. "You're right, this one's anchored, but not just to the castle." He reached into his coat and drew out a thin silver stylus, tracing the air above the sigil, without touching it. "It's tied to blood, old blood." Hermione stiffened. "What does that mean?" "It means someone with a direct ancestral tie to Hogwarts, or to one of the Founder's lines, activated this, or was used to activate it." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "And it means the next one could appear anywhere, someone with that blood walks." A chill crawled down her spine. "Students, professors, all of us." "Not all of you," he said quietly. "Only certain lines. The sigils aren't random. They're calling something, or someone." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of it pressing between them. The corridor flickered with torchlight, shadows dancing like restless ghosts. "We need to check the restricted section," Hermione said at last. "There might be records of blood-bound sigils, especially ones tied to the Founders." Draco smirked, but it lacked its usual venom. "You're suggesting we break into the library's most guarded archive?" "I'm suggesting we borrow a few books, with permission." Eventually, he let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "Merlin help us if you ever let go of that rule-following instinct. And Merlin help you if you ever develop one." They moved down the hall together, boots echoing on stone. The air thickened as they passed the frozen students. Their faces caught mid-conversation, mouths half open, eyes glassy and distant. Hermione glanced at them, her stomach twisting. "Do you think they're still aware?" she asked, softer now. Draco didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low. "In the first incident, London the apothecary, my aunt's house elf was caught in a stasis. We kept her in the cellar. Last night, I heard her breathing change, like she was dreaming." Hermione stopped. "Dreaming? Or screaming?" He met her gaze. "I think they're not just trapped. I think they're somewhere." Somewhere. The word hung in the air like smoke. Then deep beneath the castle, where the sigil's pulse thronged through the earth, something stirred in the dark. The night air bit through the cracks in the carriage windows, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine. Hermione pulled her cloak tighter, fingers brushing the cold silver clasp at her throat. Across from her, Draco Malfoy sat with his back straight, one hand resting on the sigil-etched case between them, the other absently tracing the rim of a vial containing a sliver of the frozen victim's hair. His eyes, gray and unreadable in the dim light, flicked toward her every few moments. "You're shivering," he said. Voice low. "It's cold," she answered flatly, avoiding his gaze. "And this carriage hasn't been properly warded since Hagrid started using it to ferry first years." A faint smirk touched his lips. still holding a grudge against ministry transportation. I hold a grudge against inefficiency and lack of preparedness. She glanced at the case. Do you even know what the sigil means, or are you just here for show? Draco exhaled sharply through his nose. It's not common knowledge, Granger. Not even in my family. But the outer ring, that spiral with the broken line, it's a binding. Not just a stasis charm. It's star-consuming star magic. Slowly, Hermione stilled. Consuming? Yes. Like a leech. The victims aren't just frozen, they're being drained. That's why the ministry can't reverse it. The magic's already been siphoned. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Then why leave them alive? Because they're not the end game, he murmured. They're anchors. Something's using them to tether itself here. A silence settled between them, thick and uneasy. Outside, the trees blurred past in shadowy streaks as the enchanted thestrals pulled them steadily northward. Hogwarts loomed ahead, a silhouette against the starless sky, its towers jagged like broken teeth. I didn't think you'd actually come, she admitted after a moment. I didn't have a choice, he replied, but there was something softer in his tone now. The Wisingamot's orders. And my mother. Hermione looked up, surprised. Your mother? Draco hesitated. Then, quietly, she recognized the sigil, from an old book. One she was never supposed to read. She told me to go. Said if I didn't, worse things would follow. Hermione studied him, the tight line of his jaw, the faint shadows under his eyes. He looked tired. Not the polished arrogance of their school days, but the weariness of someone who'd spent too long balancing on a knife's edge. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. He gave a small, dismissive nod. Don't be. She's fine, for now. The carriage jolted as it crossed the boundary into Hogwarts grounds, the wards humming beneath them like a low chord. The air shimmered for a heartbeat, then stilled. We should have been here sooner, Hermione murmured, watching the castle draw nearer. We were delayed by your insistence on star-proper documentation. Star. Draco drawled, but without venom. I wanted to understand what we're walking into, and now you do. No, she admitted, but I know it's worse than we thought. The carriage slowed, wheels crunching on gravel as it approached the front steps. A figure stood silhouetted in the torchlight. Professor Longbottom, arms crossed, face grim. Draco reached for the case. Ready? Hermione took a breath. No, but we don't have the luxury of waiting. They stepped out into the cold, the weight of the castle pressing down around them. Above, a shuttered window in the astronomy tower flickered. Once, twice, with a pale blue light. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Something was already inside. Lane tapped a slow, uneven rhythm against the ancient windows of Hogwarts, each droplet trailing like a tear down the rippled glass. The castle stood hushed beneath a bruised twilight sky, its usual warmth dimmed by the weight of recent dread. In the dim corridor just beyond the charms classroom, a sigil had appeared, etched into the stone floor with a precision no spell could mimic. Its lines shimmered faintly, silver in the torchlight, pulsing as if drawing breath. Hermione crouched beside it, her fingers hovering an inch above the surface. She'd read every text on archaic wards, every treatise on bloodscript from the ministry archives. But nothing matched this. The air around the sigil tasted metallic, like old coins and lightning, and her wand trembled in her pocket, as though repelled by an unseen current. You're wasting time, Granger. It won't bite. She didn't turn. Draco Malfoy's voice had lost its schoolboy sneer, but not its edge. Coiled, watchful, like a blade kept too long in its sheath. He stood several paces behind her, his hands in the pockets of a charcoal-gray ministry cloak, his face half-shadowed by the low light. I'd rather not trigger another stasis event, she said, rising slowly. 3 Muggles in London are still frozen. One of them was a child, Draco, so forgive me if I proceed with caution. He flinched, just slightly, at the use of his first name. It hummed between them, unfamiliar charged. They hadn't spoken more than formality since the ministry assigned him to her team. Now here, in the echoing silence of the school, they both once feared and fought for. The past was a third presence. Fine, he said. But you asked for my input. And the truth is, this isn't just a sigil, it's a key. A key to what? He stepped forward, boots clicking softly on stone. That depends on whose blood opens it. Hermione frowned. You think it's blood-locked? I know it is. He knelt, ignoring her sharp intake of breath, and pressed his palm flat against the sigil's center. No, Draco, wait. But it was too late. The sigil flared, not with violence, but with a slow, liquid light, like molten moonlight spilling across the floor. The lines twisted, rearranged, bloomed outward, in concentric circles, that hummed with a sound just below hearing. Draco gasped, his face paling. His veins beneath the skin of his wrist seemed to glow faintly, tracing patterns that mirrored the sigil's new shape. And then, a whisper, not from the corridor, but from the walls themselves. A chorus of voices, thin and distant, speaking in a language Hermione didn't recognize, but felt in her bones. Draco withdrew his hand as if burned. He stared at his palm where a faint red mark remained, a sigil within a sigil. That shouldn't have happened, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Hermione knelt beside him, her voice low. What was that? What did you do? I didn't do anything. He looked up, his gray eyes wide with something she'd never seen in him before, fear. It recognized me. Recognized you. What does that mean? I don't know. But my mother. She once told me our family kept oaths older than Hogwarts. Oaths sealed in blood, not words. He hesitated. She warned me never to touch anything with the spiral crown. Hermione's breath caught. The spiral crown, that's part of this design. It's been erased in every other sigil we've found. But here, it's intact. Draco looked at the sigil, now dormant again. Then someone wanted it to be seen, and they wanted me to see it. A cold silence settled between them. The rain fell harder. Somewhere deep in the castle, a door creaked shut on its own. Hermione studied him. The tight line of his jaw, the tremor in his fingers as he clenched his fist. This wasn't arrogance. This was revelation. What aren't you telling me, Draco? She asked quietly. He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw not the boy who tormented her, nor the man the Ministry sent to watch her back, but someone burdened by secrets too heavy to name. There are things, he said slowly, even I wasn't meant to remember. Rain lashed against the windows of the restricted archive, like fingernails tapping at glass. The air inside was thick with dust, and the quiet hum of old magic, charms layered over centuries to preserve knowledge too dangerous to be forgotten. Hermione's fingers traced the cracked spine of a grimoire bound in what looked like dried river bark. The title, Star Lignus Sanguinis, the living sigil star, had only appeared under moonlight, revealed by a spell she'd spent 3 sleepless nights reconstructing. Beside her, Draco Malfoy exhaled sharply, his breath fogging the glass case he'd just opened. This one's marked with the serpent's knot. My great-grandmother used it on the family wards. Supposedly it could bind a man's will with a single stroke. Hermione glanced over. And you're certain it's the same symbol? He pulled a small sketch from his coat, charcoal on parchment, smudged at the edges. It matched the sigil found on the frozen man in Diagon Alley, his face locked mid-scream, skin hardened to something like blackened iron. Same angles, same breath of shadow beneath the lines. But this, he tapped the book, this mentions Star Leyline Star. Bedin, I thought those were myths. Like the Veil or the Hallows. They're not myths, she said, flipping the brittle pages with gloved hands. They're just ignored. Too unpredictable, too old. But if these sigils are drawing power from them, that every time one activates, it's leeching magic from the land itself, Draco finished. His voice was quieter now, less sharp, less like the boy she'd hated, more like someone trying not to believe what he was seeing. A passage caught Hermione's eye. She leaned closer, whispering the translation aloud. Star. When the 13 bloods seal the earth's breath, the pact shall hold until the irons remembers its name. Star. She frowned. 13 families. Draco stiffened. There were 13 founding houses. Before the Ministry, before Hogwarts even. They made pacts, oaths written in blood and stone. My father used to mutter about them when he thought no one was listening, called them the First Compact. She turned the page. The diagram unfolded like a living thing. 13 sigils arranged in a spiral, each connected by thin pulsing lines that shimmered when the light hit them just right. At the center, a single word, Star Ferrum Star. Thyre encircled in thorns. Encircled in thorns. Iron, Hermione breathed. Not just a description of what the victims look like. It's part of the magic. The sigil doesn't just paralyze, its star transforms star. It starts living turns living town bound to the will of the pact. Draco's hand hovered over the diagram, and if the pact is breaking, or being star reawakened star, then someone's trying to restore the old balance, or weaponize it. She looked at him, the weight of it settling between them. The stasis isn't random, it's selective. The victims, Muggle and Wizard both, none of them are from old families. No Malfoys, no Weasleys, no Longbottoms. It's targeting those with no claim to the old blood. He met her gaze, pale eyes narrowed. So it's not an attack, it's a purge. A cold silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant creak of the archive's timbers. Outside, thunder rolled over London, and deep beneath the city, something ancient stirred. Hermione closed the book slowly. We need to find the other sigils, the ones not yet activated, and we need to know who's carrying the bloodline keys. Because if this pact was meant to control leyline magic, then whoever holds the sigils now holds the pulse of the magical world. Draco tucked the sketch back into his coat. Then we'd better move fast, because if my family's history has taught me anything, it's that blood pacts don't wake up on their own. Someone's calling them. Candlelight flickered low over stacks of open tomes, their spines cracked with age, their pages whispering secrets in ink that shimmered faintly under the dim glow. Dust motes danced in the air like suspended spells, and the only sound was the occasional scratch of Hermione's quill and the soft rustle of parchment as Draco turned another brittle page. Midnight had come and gone, and still they sat across from each other, at the long mahogany table in the restricted section's private annex, the weight of silence between them no longer oppressive, but almost companionable. Hermione rubbed her temples. The sigil they'd been studying, a jagged spiral, bisected by 3 vertical lines, swimming before her eyes. It's not Aramaic, she murmured, more to herself than to him, and definitely not standard High Latin. The syntax is wrong, almost inverted. Draco didn't look up. It's Old Cumbrian, rare. Meant to be read under moonlight, not candlelight. He tapped the edge of the page with a pale finger. See how the ink shifts when you tilt it? That's not pigment. It's infused with lunar residue. She blinked, then did as he suggested. The lines trembled, reconfiguring slightly, and for a fraction of a second, the symbol pulsed with a soft silver glow. Hermione exhaled sharply. You're right. He glanced up then, gray eyes catching the candlelight like shards of ice. I know it's hard to believe, Granger, but I wasn't only born with a silver spoon. I was also taught to use it, for more than just stirring tea. A smile tugged at her lips despite herself. I never said you weren't intelligent, Malfoy. Just historically, your intelligence has been applied to the wrong causes. And now? His voice was quiet, almost cautious. Now, you're helping decode a magical plague that's petrifying people in Diagon Alley and Trafalgar Square. So, progress. She set down her quill and stretched, the muscles in her shoulders protesting. Still, it's maddening. Every lead forks into 3 others. The sigils appear without trace, no residual magic, no witnesses, just cold stone and frozen bodies. Draco closed the book with a soft thud. My grandmother used to say that when magic leaves no trace, it's because it was never meant to be found. That some spells are born in blood, not wand work. Hermione studied him. The sharp angles of his face were softened in the low light. The perpetual sneer replaced by something unreadable. Weariness, perhaps, or something closer to vulnerability. You've been holding back, she said carefully. There's more you know about these sigils. More than you've told the committee. He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his robe and pulled out a small folded square of vellum, yellowed with age. He hesitated, then slid it across the table. This was in my father's private vault. I wasn't supposed to take it, but when I saw the first sigil in London, it matched. Hermione unfolded it slowly. The same spiral, the same lines, but this one was inscribed within a circle of thorns, a mark she didn't recognize. "What is this?" "The Pact of Hollow Hill," he said, voice low. "A blood agreement between 5 old families, supposedly sealed over 1,000 years ago. It wasn't meant to be broken, and it wasn't meant to be remembered." She looked up. "And you think this pact is what's being awakened?" "I think someone is trying to. And if they succeed, it won't just be stasis. It'll be subjugation. The sigils aren't traps. They're anchors. For something much older." For a long moment she said nothing. Then quietly, "Why tell me this now?" He met her gaze. "Because you're the only one who might believe me without calling for aurors. And because I don't want to do this alone." The admission hung in the air, fragile as the candle flame. Outside, the wind pressed against the high windows, and the castle seemed to sigh around them. Hermione reached out, her fingers brushing the vellum, then looked back at him. "Then we're in this together," she said. "No more secrets, not even inconvenient truths." Draco gave a slow nod. "Truce?" She held out her hand. "Truce." When their fingers met, the candles flared, just once, as if acknowledging the shift. And in that moment, the past, with its grudges and war-tainted shadows, didn't vanish, but it bent, just enough. The air beneath the Ministry of Magic tasted of damp stone and something sharper, ozone perhaps, or the metallic tang of unraveling enchantments. Hermione's boots clicked too loudly against the cracked tile as she descended the emergency stairwell, her wand gripped tight in one hand, the other clutching a frayed notebook filled with half-formed theories and desperate annotations. The elevators had failed an hour ago, their usual cheerful chimes replaced by a low shuddering groan before falling silent. Now only the emergency lumos strips flickered weakly along the walls, casting long, trembling shadows that made the corridors seem to breathe. She reached the sublevels just as a gust of cold air rushed up from below, carrying with it the scent of burnt parchment and iron. Her breath fogged in front of her. The sigil was down here. She could feel it, a pressure behind her eyes, a hum in her bones. It wasn't like the others. This one was awake. "Granger." Draco's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He stepped out from a side passage, his pale hair catching the dim light, his face drawn. He wore a ministry-issue cloak, but beneath it, she noticed the faint glint of old silver embroidery at his cuffs. Pure blood sigil work, dormant but still potent. "You felt it too, then?" She nodded, throat tight. "The wards are collapsing. The Department of Mysteries just went dark. All the tracking spells on the previous sigils gone." Draco exhaled sharply, his breath a pale cloud. "They're not just appearing anymore. They're star-alerting star." They moved together down the final corridor, their steps synchronized despite years of instinctive wariness. The sigil was etched into the floor of a disused storage chamber, once used for confiscated dark artifacts. Now the shelves were overturned, the glass cases shattered, as if whatever was stored here had tried to flee. The sigil itself pulsed faintly, a deep cobalt white seeping from its grooves, veins of ancient script spiraling outward like roots. It was larger than the others, 12 feet across, and intricately layered with symbols that predated the founders. Hermione crouched, careful not to touch the stone. "This isn't just a stasis sigil, it's a key, or a lock." Draco knelt beside her, his fingers hovering just above the surface. "It's written in old High Sigillic. Not many could read it. Fewer still would dare to." "Your family could," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. "My grandmother used to say some seals were never meant to be broken, that certain doors once opened couldn't be closed again." A sudden tremor shook the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Above them, alarms began to wail, muffled, distorted, as if the sound itself were being consumed. The sigil flared, and for a moment Hermione saw not stone, but a vast, starless sky, and beneath it a city of black towers, silent and watching. She gasped, jerking back. "It's not just magic, it's alive." Draco's hand shot out, gripping her arm. "Don't look directly at it. Not without shielding. These sigils, they're not traps, they're star invitations." "Star invitations to what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he drew a small knife from within his robes, pale bone carved with spirals. "My blood's been part of this language for centuries. If it recognizes me, maybe it'll pause. Long enough for you to record the outer ring before it. No, she said, pulling away. You don't know what it'll do. You could be trapped like the others. I'm the only one who can do this, Granger, and you're the only one who can understand what it means after. Another tremor, stronger this time. The walls groaned. Somewhere, glass shattered. She looked at him, really looked. Not the boy who tormented her. Not the man she'd distrusted for years, but someone weary and wary, and perhaps afraid, and still willing to step into the dark. Make it quick, she whispered, already opening her notebook, her quill poised. Draco lowered the blade to his palm. The sigil began to sing. The air in the restricted archives tasted of dust and forgotten spells, thick with the weight of centuries. Hermione's fingers trembled slightly as she traced the brittle edge of a vellum scroll, its ink faded to the color of dried blood. The sigil drawn there, a jagged spiral, encircling a broken crown, matched the one found beneath the Thames embankment only hours before. They're accelerating, she murmured, more to herself than to the figure, hovering near the doorway. 3 in the last 2 days. And this one, it's more complex. There's a binding rune layered beneath the stasis glyph. I've seen this structure before, in the Black Family grimoires. Draco stepped forward, his polished boots silent against the stone floor. He didn't touch the scroll, ministry protocol and old habits, but his pale eyes scanned the symbols with an unsettling familiarity. That's not just black, he said quietly. That's House Lestrange. Modified, but the lineage is clear. The trident twist at the base. Only the Lestranges used that variant in their blood wards. Hermione looked up sharply. You're certain? Positive. His voice was cool, but there was a tightness in his jaw she hadn't seen before. My mother taught me that much. Before everything changed. She exhaled slowly, folding the scroll with deliberate care. Then we're not just dealing with ancient magic. We're dealing with descendants. Someone with access to old family knowledge. Someone who knows how to weaponize it. They left the archives in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing between them like a third presence. The ministry corridors were quieter than usual, most departments operating under skeletal staffing, due to the ongoing crisis. Even the enchanted ceiling in the atrium, usually a vibrant mimicry of the London sky, had dimmed to a dull, overcast gray. Back in the Joint Task Force chamber, a repurposed conference room warded with anti-eavesdropping charms, Hermione laid out the evidence on the central table: crime scene sketches, magical residue analyses, and the latest report from St. Mungo's on the stasis victims. 12 now, trapped in perfect stillness, hearts beating once every hour, breathed strong like clockwork. Draco leaned over the parchment from the Lestrange vault. This can't get out, he said. If people know the Lestranges are involved. They're not, Hermione interrupted. Not officially. The last known Lestrange heir died in Azkaban. This is someone using their knowledge, not their name. Same difference to the public, Draco muttered. They'll see blood purity, dark magic, and panic, and the Daily Prophet will have a field day. She rubbed her temples. Then we find the source before they do. A knock at the door. Percy Weasley entered, his expression tight, a sealed ministry envelope in hand. New report from Muggle London, he said, placing it before Hermione. Another sigil, Camden, Underground Station, 7 victims this time. She broke the seal quickly, scanning the page. Same pattern, no witnesses, no magical traces beyond the sigil itself. She looked up. How did the Muggle authorities even contact us? They're not supposed to know. Percy hesitated. They didn't. The alert came through internal affairs. Someone in the ministry filed the report before the Muggle authorities made it public. Hermione froze. That's impossible. The protocol is that only active field agents or Aurors on duty can file cross-jurisdictional alerts. Draco finished, eyes narrowing. And only after verification. Who filed it? Percy glanced at the door, then lowered his voice. It was logged under Arthur Weasley's credentials. Hermione's breath caught. My father hasn't worked in magical law enforcement in years. He doesn't even have active clearance. Exactly, Percy said. Someone used his access, and they did it minutes after the sigil appeared, before the local Auror team had even arrived on site. The room fell still. Someone inside the ministry wasn't just leaking information. They were one step ahead. Draco met Hermione's gaze. They're not just watching us, he said. They're guiding us, feeding us just enough to keep us chasing shadows, and making sure we never see the person holding the wand," Hermione whispered. Outside, the enchanted sky flickered, once, twice, then went dark. Rain tapped steadily against the high windows of the Ministry's restricted research annex, a quiet rhythm drowned out by the rustle of parchment and the occasional scratch of quill on vellum. Hermione Granger stood at the center of a sprawling map unfurled across a long oak table, its surface inked with dozens of red dots, each marking a sigil's appearance. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stepped back, eyes tracing the pattern forming beneath her calculations. It couldn't be coincidence. Not in London, not in Edinburgh, not in the sleepy village of Ottery St. Catchpole, where the latest victim, a Muggle postman, had been found frozen mid-step, his hands still clutching a bundle of letters. The sigils had emerged overnight, etched into stone, pavement, even the bark of ancient oaks, glowing faintly before fading, leaving behind bodies locked in stasis, breath suspended, eyes wide, but unseeing. Hermione had mapped them all. Then now, with connecting lines drawn in precise charcoal strokes, the truth unfolded like a cursed bloom. A circle. Not just any circle. A perfect, massive ritual circle. Its circumference spanning nearly the entire British Isles. The sigils weren't random acts of terror. They were nodes. Anchors. Points of power deliberately placed, forming a boundary that pulsed just beneath the surface of the world. She exhaled, her breath fogging the cool air. "It's a containment spell," she whispered. "Or a summoning." The door creaked open behind her. Footsteps, measured and unhurried, crossed the stone floor. "You're still here," Draco Malfoy said, shrugging off his charcoal gray cloak. "I'd have thought you'd have run out of candles by now." Hermione didn't turn. "I've made a breakthrough." He came to stand beside her, his gaze flicking over the map. His expression remained carefully neutral, but she caught the tightening at the corners of his eyes. "That's extensive." "Every sigil since the first appeared 3 weeks ago," she said. "I cross-referenced Ministry reports, Muggle news archives, even local weather disturbances. There were spikes in magical resonance near each site. At first, I thought they were isolated incidents. But look." She traced the outer line with her finger. Each location aligns with wayline intersections. Old sites of power, places where the veil between worlds is thin. Draco leaned in, fingers brushing the edge of the parchment near Caithness, where a sigil had been found carved into a standing stone. "This one, my grandmother used to speak of this place. Said it was where the old families used to meet during the blood moons." Before the statute of secrecy, Hermione glanced at him. "You never mentioned that." He met her gaze, cool and guarded. "You never asked." A silence settled between them, thick with history, of childhood taunts, of war, of choices made and unmade. But now, standing over this map, the old animosities felt distant, almost trivial. "This isn't just magic," Hermione said. "It's ritual, deep, ancient. The kind that requires blood knowledge, the kind your family used to guard." Draco's jaw twitched. "And now someone else is using it. Or someone who wants us to think it's you." He let out a short, mirthless laugh. "Of course. Blame the last pure blood with a library full of forbidden texts." "That's not what I'm doing," she said firmly. "But you know things. Symbols, chants, lineages. I can't access. The Ministry doesn't keep records of half the rites your ancestors practiced. They were buried, forgotten, until now." He studied the map again, his voice quieter now. "This circle, if it's what I think it is, it's not meant to trap people. It's meant to wake something." "Wake what?" His fingers hovered over the center of the circle, marked by a small, unassuming dot in the Lake District. "There's a legend, a covenant. The first Watchers, beings older than the Ministry, older than Hogwarts, bound beneath the earth by blood and oath. If someone completes the circle, they don't just summon them. They break the seal." Hermione felt a chill crawl up her spine. "And the victims? The stasis? Offerings?" Draco said softly. "Or anchors. Living sigils to stabilize the breach." She looked at the map again, not as a researcher now, but as someone standing at the edge of a precipice. 12 sites, 12 families perhaps, 12 betrayals in the making. "We need to find the 13th, she said, "because whatever this is, it's not finished." Rain lashed against the grimy windows of the ministry's restricted archives, drumming a steady rhythm on the fogged glass like impatient fingers. Hermione Granger wiped a smear of soot from the edge of the parchment, her breath shallow. Before her lay the latest tracing, copied from a site near King's Cross, where 7 Muggles had been found petrified in a perfect circle, their faces frozen mid-scream, skin cold and metallic to the touch. She adjusted her glasses, frowning. The symbol was crude in execution, but the structure was unmistakable. A tri-layered ring of interlocking arcs, each segmented with runes that didn't match any known magical language. Only the outermost ring bore anything recognizable, a series of inverted crescents that echoed ancient wards used in pre-goblin rebellions. A sharp knock broke the silence. The door swung open before she could answer, and Draco Malfoy stepped inside, his charcoal cloak dripping onto the stone floor. He didn't apologize. Instead, he peered over her shoulder, his breath cool against her ear. "You've been staring at that for 3 hours, he said. "You're missing the heart of it." Hermione tensed. "I've been cross-referencing every sigil in the ministry's collection. This isn't in any of them." "No, it wouldn't be." He stepped around her, long fingers brushing the parchment without touching it. "Because it's not meant to be found. Not by people like you." She bristled. "And what, exactly, am I not?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze was locked on the symbol, silver eyes narrowing. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "This," he said slowly, "is the Iron Circle." Hermione blinked. "That's a myth, a bedtime story pure bloods tell to scare children into not meddling with ley lines." "Is it?" He turned, finally meeting her eyes. "Then explain why those 7 Muggles are encased in enchanted iron, not conjured, not transfigured." Dar groaned. "Star, as if the stone beneath them bled metal and swallowed them whole." She swallowed. The report had mentioned that unusual crystalline formations spreading from the victim's feet, fusing with the pavement. At the time, she'd assumed experimental dark magic. Not this. "The Iron Circle was said to be a prison," Draco continued, voice low. "Not for people, for power. It draws on the natural flow of magical ley lines, siphons it, and binds it into a static loop. But it requires blood to activate, not just any blood, blood tied to the land, old families, blood pacts." "That's absurd," she said, though her voice wavered. "Ley lines aren't sentient, they can't be bound like that. Tell that to the earth." He pointed to the central rune, one she hadn't been able to place. "That's not a ward, it's a sigil of claim. Star sanguis tenet terram. Star blood holds the land. My grandmother used to trace it on the hearth at Malfoy Manor during solstice rites. Purely ceremonial," she said. "I saw what happened when a rat crossed the threshold after. It turned to iron dust in seconds." Hermione stared at him. "You're telling me someone is activating ancient blood magic on Muggle streets?" "Not just Muggle streets," he said. "Look at the locations. Diagon Alley's outer wards flickered last night. Nocturne's underground channels collapsed near the old knot crypts. These aren't random. They're star junctions, star points where ley lines intersect beneath Britain. Someone's mapping them, marking them." "And the victims?" "Anchors," he said. "Living conduits. The circle needs sacrifice to stabilize. Once it's complete, it won't just siphon magic, it'll invert it. Turn flow into stagnation, silence spells, break wands, undo centuries of magical development." Hermione felt a chill crawl up her spine, like a magical famine. "Worse," Draco murmured. "It'll make magic star controllable. Star whoever holds the sigil controls who can use magic. And who cannot." Silence settled between them, thick with implication. The rain slowed. A single drop fell from his cloak, striking the parchment like a period at the end of a sentence. After a long moment, Hermione looked up. "You know more than you're saying." He didn't deny it. "My family's name is on one of the original pacts. So are the Greengrasses, the Lestranges, and yours isn't, Granger. If this is about bloodline legitimacy, you're already on the wrong side of the circle." She exhaled sharply. "Then we don't have time for secrets. Tell me everything. Well, this isn't just about magic failing. It's about who gets to be magical at all." The iron gates of Malfoy Manor groaned open without a touch, as though the house itself had been waiting. Hermione tightened her grip on her wand, stepping forward onto the gravel path that crunched beneath her boots. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and old ivy, and the sky above hung low, bruised with clouds that refused to break. Beside her, Draco moved with a quiet confidence, his cloak drawn tightly against the chill. "You're sure these archives are still intact?" she asked, her voice cutting through the silence. "They're warded," he said, not looking at her. "Protected by blood magic older than Hogwarts. Only a Malfoy, or someone they allow, can enter." She frowned. "And you're allowing me?" He paused, his gray eyes flickering to hers. "I'm not doing this for you, Granger. I'm doing it because if these sigils are what I think they are, we're already behind." They reached the front doors, towering oaks carved with serpentine patterns that seemed to shift when looked at indirectly. Draco placed his palm flat against the center panel. A faint blue light pulsed beneath his skin, spreading like veins across the wood. A series of clicks echoed from within, and the doors swung inward with a whisper. The entrance hall was colder than Hermione remembered. Dust hung in the air, undisturbed for years, and the chandelier above glowed with ghostly candlelight, not fire, but trapped will-o'-the-wisps, trembling in glass orbs. Portraits lined the walls, their occupants watching with silent intensity. "This way," Draco said, leading her down a narrow corridor hidden behind a tapestry of the Malfoy crest. The passage sloped downward, stairs carved from black stone spiraling into the earth. The walls here were inscribed with runes that shimmered faintly, words in a dialect Hermione didn't recognize. She traced one with her fingertips, and it flared briefly. "A warning, don't touch the walls," Draco said sharply. "They test your blood." She pulled her hand back. "Test it for what?" "Purity. Loyalty. You wouldn't pass either." She bristled but held her tongue. At the bottom of the stairs stood a door of fused obsidian, sealed with a sigil that made her breath catch. It was identical to the ones appearing in the cities, the same interlocking circles, the same central eye-like glyph. But here, it pulsed with slow, rhythmic light, like a sleeping heart. "This is it," he said. "The ancestral vault. My father never let me pass this door. Not fully." "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "He showed me fragments, but blood magic only reveals its full truth to the heir when they come seeking it of their own will. Not under command." He placed both hands on the sigil. "I, Draco Lucius Malfoy, claim the memory of my line." The sigil flared, not blue, but crimson, and the door split down the middle, sliding open with a sigh. Inside, the air hummed. Shelves lined the walls, not with books, but with crystal vials containing swirling mists. Memories, Hermione realized. And at the center of the room, hovering above a stone pedestal, was a book bound in silver thread and human skin. "That's a grimoire," Draco said, stepping forward. "From the first Malfoy to settle in Britain. It records every pact, every enchantment, every secret we've ever kept." Hermione approached slowly. "And you're certain it mentions the sigils?" "I'm certain it knows why they're waking up." He reached for the book, but a shock of energy threw him back. He gasped, clutching his chest. "Draco, it's not for me alone," he said through gritted teeth. "It wants balance, a union of blood and mind, light and shadow." She looked at him, then at the book. "You're saying it wants me to touch it too?" He nodded. "Together, or not at all." She swallowed, stepping beside him. Their fingers brushed as they reached out, then clasped, not by choice, but as if the magic demanded it. They placed their joined hands on the cover. The room exploded in light. The air in the underground passage was thick with the scent of damp stone, and something older, ozone and rust, like lightning struck metal. Hermione's wand trembled slightly in her grip, its tip casting a narrow beam that cut through the darkness. Cobwebs clung to the archway ahead, thick as fishing net, glistening with unseen moisture. Behind her, Draco's breath was steady, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. He hadn't spoken since they'd passed the warding stones, 3 upright slabs carved with runes that pulsed once, faintly, as they'd stepped over. "This wasn't on any ministry map," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Of course it wasn't," Draco replied, voice low. "My great-grandmother's journal mentioned a vault beneath the old Wiltshire estate, but the ministry sealed it after the war. Thought it was just another hoard of dark artifacts. And now I'm beginning to wonder if they didn't seal it for the wrong reasons." They stepped into a circular chamber, its walls lined with blackened iron panels, etched with interlocking sigils. Hermione gasped. They were identical to the ones appearing in London, Paris, even New York. Except here, they shimmered, still faintly active. Her fingers hovered over one, careful not to touch. These aren't just symbols, they're conduits, anchors for a binding spell. Draco moved to the opposite side, brushing dust from a stone plinth. There's a name here, Star Societas, Ferrum Sigillum, Star the Iron Sigil Society. Hermione joined him, heart pounding. I've never heard of it. That's because it was erased, he said, voice tight. After the Potters and the Weasleys purged the old families, names like Malfoy, Knott, Greengrass, anything tied to pre-war traditions was buried. But this was real. Not dark magic, not light. Something else. She studied the inscriptions. Latin, yes, but layered with older symbols. Sumerian influences, maybe, or Proto-Runic. It speaks of balance, a covenant between magic and blood, not about supremacy, about stewardship. The sigils weren't meant to trap people. They were meant to contain something. Draco was silent a moment, then turned toward a recessed panel in the wall. My father once told me, not as a child. Later, when he thought I might understand, he said the old families weren't just about blood. They were about promises, oaths written in bone and ink. He pressed his palm to the panel. A ripple passed through the chamber. The sigils flared, then dimmed, and the wall slid open with a groan. Inside lay a vault of scrolls, crystal vials, and a single iron-bound book resting on a pedestal. Hermione stepped forward, but Draco caught her arm. Wait, that book, it's bound in human skin, not metaphorically. She recoiled. That's barbaric, or sacred, he said quietly. To them it was a vow, a life given to preserve knowledge, not taken, offered. She looked at him, truly looked. The torchlight played across his face, no longer the sneering boy of Hogwarts, nor the broken man after the war, but someone caught between legacy and choice. You believe in this. I don't know what I believe, he admitted. But I know my ancestors didn't wake up one morning and decide to curse random Muggles. Something changed. Something broke the covenant. Hermione approached the book slowly. The moment her fingers brushed the cover, the chamber trembled. Images flashed, faces, voices, a great seal cracking beneath a storm-racked sky. She gasped, stepping back. Draco caught her elbow. You saw it too? A memory, she whispered, or a warning. The society wasn't destroyed, it was betrayed. And now, someone's using the sigils the wrong way, twisting the purpose. He looked at the iron panels, then back at her. If the sigils were meant to contain, what happens when they start appearing on people? She met his gaze. Then whatever was locked away is trying to get out. Rain lashed against the high windows of Malfoy Manor's East Library, casting jagged shadows across the floor like cracked glass. The air smelled of damp parchment and old stone, the kind of scent that clung to generations of secrets. Draco stood motionless before a crumbling tome bound in black leather, his fingers tracing the sigil etched into its cover, a spiral within a triangle, ringed by runes in a dialect even Hermione had only begun to translate. It's real, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It's not just myth. The Pact of 13. My great-grandfather signed it. Hermione stepped closer, her boots silent on the worn rug. She had followed him here against protocol, against reason, but something in his eyes when he'd read the name Malfoy in the margins of the ancient scroll had frightened her, not for herself, but for him. It doesn't make you complicit, she said carefully. Knowing isn't the same as choosing. He turned then, his face pale, the usual sharpness of his features softened by something raw. You don't understand. This wasn't just allegiance. This was blood magic. Granger, worse than the Dark Mark. They bound their magic to a curse. A star-sleeping curse star. See, meant to rise when the world became impure again. And now, it's waking. His hand trembled slightly as he pointed to a passage near the bottom of the open page. Hermione leaned in. The ink was faded, but the words were unmistakable. Star, by our blood we seal the sleep of the unworthy. When the old ways falter, the sigils shall rise, and the unworthy shall know stillness. Star. She exhaled slowly. They weren't just preserving pure blood supremacy, they were planning to star her race star everyone they deemed unfit. Draco closed the book with a soft thud. My father never told me. Or maybe he didn't know.
But my grandmother.
She used to burn sage on the winter solstice, whispering to the portraits. I thought it was just her superstition. It was a ward. A failed one. Hermione watched him pace, the weight of centuries pressing down on his shoulders. For the first time, she didn't see the boy who'd sneered at her in corridors, or the man who'd once stood silent as her friends were tortured. She saw someone trapped by legacy, by silence, by the unbearable burden of inherited sin. It wasn't your choice, she said again, firmer now. You're not responsible for what they did, but you are responsible for what you do now. He stopped, staring at her. And what if I can't stop it? What if the only way to break the pact is to spill the blood of those who signed it? The last descendants. That's not an option, she said sharply. There has to be another way. Magic like this, it thrives on guilt, on sacrifice. It wants you to believe the only answer is more blood. But that's how it wins. He let out a bitter laugh. Since when did you become the optimist? Since I realized that people can change, she said, stepping forward. You have. He looked away, jaw tight. Don't say that. Don't make me believe that. Why not? Her voice softened. You've spent years rebuilding. Your name, your reputation, your life. You didn't have to take this assignment. You could have refused, but you didn't. You're here. Your star-trying star. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant roll of thunder. Outside, the sigils pulsed faintly in the city, small iron-hued glimmers beneath the rain, like wounds in the world. Finally, Draco spoke, his voice low. My mother used to say, our family was built on pride and shadows. She wanted me to be something else, lighter. I didn't understand them. Hermione reached out, hesitated, then gently placed her hand on his arm. Then be that man now, not for her, not for your name, for the people still standing, for the ones who can still be saved. He didn't pull away, and when he met her gaze again, something in his eyes had shifted, no longer guarded, no longer alone. Rain fell in silver sheets over Salisbury Plain, pooling in the ancient grooves of the standing stones, each drop sizzling faintly as it struck the sixth sigil carved into the central stone. The air hummed, low and insistent, like the breath of something waking. Hermione Granger pulled her cloak tighter, the ministry issue fabric, damp and heavy, her fingers brushing the wand at her hip. She could feel it, the wrongness in the magic here. It wasn't dark, not exactly, but old. Older than Hogwarts, older than the ministry, older than sense. Draco Malfoy stood a few paces ahead, his back rigid, pale hair plastered to his temples. He had been silent since they apparated in, eyes fixed on the sigil's looping, unfamiliar lines. It pulsed with a dull glow, shifting between cobalt and rust, like tarnished blood. This isn't in any grimoire I've seen, he said finally, voice low. Not even in the Black family archives. Hermione stepped forward, careful not to touch the stone. It's reacting to something. The ley lines, can you feel it? They're vibrating. He turned, his gray eyes narrowing. Of course I can feel it. You don't grow up learning blood magic without knowing when the earth is screaming. She bristled. I didn't mean. No, you didn't, he cut in, but without venom. But you still don't trust me. Not really. She didn't answer. Because he was right. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of ozone and wet earth. The stones groaned a deep tectonic sound that made her teeth ache. Above, the clouds swirled in a slow, unnatural spiral, as if something were pulling at the sky. We're running out of time, she said. This one's stronger. It's already disrupting apparition across southern England. Emergency port keys are failing. Malfoy crouched, tracing the sigil's edge with a gloved hand. It's not just a stasis mark. It's a key, a trigger. A key to what? He didn't look up. I don't know, not yet. But the pattern, it's recursive. Each sigil builds on the last. This one, it's the penultimate. Whatever they're summoning, whatever they're waking, it's almost ready. The chill that had nothing to do with the rain crept down her spine. Who's behind this? The pure-blood traditionalists? The remnants of Voldemort's faction? No, he said softly. This predates that. This is about blood. Yes, but not purity. Legacy. There are families, older than mine, older than the Potters, who swore oaths before the ministry existed. Oaths to the land, to the old gods. When the statute of secrecy went up, they went silent, but not gone. She stared at him. You're saying this is some kind of rebellion? I'm saying they're reclaiming something they believe was stolen. A crack split the air, not thunder, but magic. One of the smaller stones split down the middle, moss and lichen peeling back like scorched skin. Hermione drew her wand, heart pounding. We need to disrupt it, she said. Now. Malfoy shook his head. Break it, and it might activate the final sigil early. We don't even know where that one is. Then what do you suggest? He rose, rain streaking his face. We trace the resonance. Each sigil leaves a mark in the magical field, like a fingerprint. If we can follow it, we might find the source. The architect. She hesitated. That's dangerous. It could lead us into a trap. It already has, he said, gesturing to the pulsing stone. The question is whether we walk out of it. Another groan from the earth. The sigil flared, brighter, hotter, and for a moment Hermione thought she saw figures in the mist. Tall, hooded, moving between the stones. Watching. She reached into her robe and pulled out the enchanted quill and parchment she'd been using to document the sigils. Then we document everything. Every shift, every pulse. If we can't stop it yet, we at least need to understand it. Malfoy studied her, then gave a single nod. You still think like a student, and you still think like a pure-blood aristocrat. A ghost of a smirk touched his lips. And yet here we are. The wind howled, the stones trembled, and beneath their feet, something ancient stirred. Rain lashed against the high-arched windows of the Department of Mysteries, each drop sounding like a whispered secret against the enchanted glass. The dim, green-tinged torchlight flickered across the obsidian floor, casting long, trembling shadows that slithered like serpents toward the center of the chamber, where the veil stood cloaked in silence. Hermione stood before it, her fingers tracing the edge of a charred parchment, her breath shallow. The final sigil had been translated. It wasn't just a binding, it was a key. Draco stepped beside her, his boots clicking softly, his usual composure frayed at the edges. He held a silver dagger in one hand, its hilt engraved with thorn vines. An heirloom, she realized, from the Malfoy vaults. It's not just about stasis, he murmured. They're not trying to freeze people. They're trying to replace them. The bodies are vessels. The iron circle completes when a 13th is bound, and a first is awakened. Hermione looked up, her heart thudding. You're saying they've been preparing a resurrection. A return, he corrected, his voice low. The old bloodline laws. My great-aunt wrote about it. The circle of iron was meant to restore the true rulers of magic, those whose blood carries the ancient wards. But it requires betrayal. One of the 13 must willingly offer the sigil's countermark, a traitor from within. She turned sharply. Someone in the ministry. A cold draft stirred behind them, and the veil trembled. Not with wind, but magic. Something stirring beneath the surface. Then footsteps, calm, deliberate. They turned to see Rufus Greengrass stepping from the shadows, his wand tucked neatly into the sleeve of his formal robes, his smile thin and polished. Took you long enough, he said, voice smooth as oil. I admit I didn't expect Granger to crack the lunar cipher so quickly. And Draco, I always knew you'd disappoint your ancestors. But this, working star with star, how Muggle-born of you. Draco's grip tightened on the dagger. You swore allegiance to the ministry, to peace. And I upheld it, Greengrass replied, unfolding a small black scroll from his pocket. Until peace became surrender. We let them rewrite history, Draco. We let them dilute the old magic, and our power to half-bloods. And worse, those with no lineage at all. He glanced at Hermione. You've done impressive work, Miss Granger. Your research on sigil etymology led us straight to the final wording sequence. Thank you for that. Hermione's stomach twisted. You planted the questions. You funneled me toward the answers. Subtly, he admitted. A well-placed mental here, a reference in an archive there. You're brilliant, but even geniuses followed the path laid before them. Draco stepped forward, placing himself between Hermione and Greengrass. The circle's broken. 3 sigils are already undone. You can't complete the ritual. "The circle is already complete," Greengrass said, raising his wand. "The 13th sigil was marked tonight, in the ministry cellar, underneath the old records office. Your friend, Croaker, he fought well, but loyalty to the ministry won't save him now." Hermione's breath caught. "You've taken Croaker?" "He volunteered," Greengrass corrected, eyes gleaming. "He believed in the restoration, as will others, once the first awakens. The blood remembers, even when a mind forgets." A pulse of dark energy rippled from the scroll in his hand, and the veil shuddered violently. From beyond, a voice, deep, ancient, and chillingly familiar, whispered through the fabric of the world. Draco didn't hesitate. He slashed the dagger across his palm and pressed it against the nearest sigil fragment on the floor. Blood sizzled as the mark flared crimson. "Blood denies blood," he incanted, voice strained. Line severed. Oath unmade. Greengrass snarled, firing a curse, but Hermione was already moving. "Expelliarmus!" His wand flew. "Incarcerus!" Ropes of light bound him, but his laughter echoed through the chamber. "You've delayed the inevitable. The circle is not bound by one man. It is written in blood older than your laws, older than your names." And beyond the veil, the whisper grew louder. Hermione reached for Draco's hand, their fingers brushing, sticky with blood and magic. "Whatever's coming," she said, "we face it together." He didn't smile, but he didn't let go. The cold seeped through the stone floor in jagged waves, climbing up Hermione's spine like fingers of frost. She stirred, blinking against the dim, flickering light, torchlight, but not ordinary. The flames burned blue at the base and pulsed faintly, as though breathing. Her head throbbed, a dull ache behind her temples, remnants of the spell that had struck her from behind. She tried to move her arms and found them bound behind her back with something tight and unyielding, rope laced with magic, she guessed by the faint hum beneath her skin. She was in a chamber, ancient and circular, its walls carved with symbols that made her breath catch. Not just any symbols, sigils, dozens of them, etched deep into the stone, glowing faintly in shifting hues of silver and violet. They pulsed in rhythm like a slow, sleeping heartbeat. She recognized fragments of old High Arcanum, but the syntax was altered, twisted into unfamiliar configurations. This wasn't just ritual magic, it was star-rewriting star magic, the kind that didn't just cast but changed the rules. A groan came from her left. Draco lay sprawled on the stone, his pale hair streaked with dust, one side of his robes torn at the shoulder. He blinked open his eyes, gray and sharp even in the dim light, instantly scanning their surroundings. "Where the hell are we?" His voice was low, rough with disorientation. "The ritual site," Hermione whispered, testing the bindings again. "They've already begun the convergence." Draco sat up slowly, wincing. "Convergence of what?" "The sigils," she said, her eyes tracing the patterns. "They're not just trapping people, they're siphoning something. Life force, magical essence. I'm not sure, but this place, it's a nexus. All the sigils across the cities, London, Paris, Hogsmeade, they're connected, funneling energy here." He turned to her, frowning. "How do you know that?" "Look at the central motif." She nodded toward the floor, where a massive sigil had been painted in what looked like crushed bone and ash. "It's a convergence spiral, blood-based, old, older than the Ministry, older than Hogwarts even. This is pre-wizarding law, pure blood ancestral magic, the kind your family used to keep locked in vaults and grimoires." He didn't deny it. His jaw tightened. "My family didn't practice this." "No," she said quietly, "but they knew it, and they protected it. That's why they assigned you to this case, isn't it? Not because you're reformed, because you're one of the last who can read this." He didn't answer. The silence between them, stretched, thick with unspoken histories, schoolyard taunts, war scars, the weight of names like Malfoy and Granger, and everything they'd come to mean. A door creaked open at the far end of the chamber. Footsteps echoed, measured, deliberate. 3 figures entered, hooded in dark robes, their faces obscured. At their center walked a woman, tall and poised, her hands clasped before her. She lowered her hood, revealing sharp cheekbones, silver-streaked black hair, and eyes that gleamed with cold certainty. "Hermione Granger," she said, voice like flint. "And Draco Malfoy, the unlikely pair chosen to unravel what was never meant to be found." Hermione lifted her chin. You're the ones behind the stasis sigils. You're killing people. We are Star Awakening Star, the woman corrected. The world has grown soft, corrupted by half-blood politics and Muggle-born ideals. The old blood must rise again. These are not deaths. They are offerings. The stasis preserves them, sustains the flow, and soon when the convergence is complete, the first line will return. Draco's voice cut through, sharp with disbelief. You're insane. The first line is myth. A bedtime story, pure blood fanatics tell their children. The woman smiled, thin, humorless. And yet, here we stand at the threshold. You, Draco, are proof it was never truly extinct. Your bloodline carries the key, and hers, she gestured to Hermione. Her mind makes her dangerous, but also useful. Hermione's pulse quickened. You won't get away with this. Oh, we already have. The woman stepped closer, kneeling before them. The ritual requires two anchors, one of pure descent, one of unbroken intellect. You two are perfect. Together, you will open the gate, willingly or not. Draco's eyes met Hermione's, and for the first time she saw something raw beneath the usual arrogance. Fear, yes, but also resolve. They were out of time. Rain lashed the jagged stones of the abandoned observatory on the Isle of Dreer, each drop sizzling against the blackened sigil carved into the plateau's center. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the twisted figures standing at cardinal points, robed, masked, their hands raised like conductors of some unholy symphony. The air hummed, thick with ozone and the metallic tang of raw magic. Beneath the earth, something ancient stirred. Hermione Granger pressed herself against the cliffside, her breath shallow, her wand gripped so tightly her knuckles ached. The descent had been treacherous, slick stone, hidden ruins that flared to life beneath her feet, and the constant dread that one wrong step would trigger a ward. Behind her, Draco Malfoy crouched, his pale fingers tracing the edge of a cracked slate tablet they'd pried from the ruins below. It's not just a sigil, he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. It's a key. They're not just tapping the ley lines, they're rewriting them. She turned to him, rain streaking her face. Rewriting how? He met her gaze, gray eyes unreadable. They're binding the magic to bloodlines, not just any blood, only those they deem pure. It'll lock out everyone else, permanently. A cold heavier than the storm settled in her chest. This wasn't just about power, it was about erasure. They'll fracture the magical world, she whispered. The backlash, the imbalance. It could unravel everything. Muggle-borns, half-bloods, even some pure-blood families they've deemed unworthy. And once the ritual completes, Draco said, the magic itself will answer only to their will. No wand, no incantation will work, unless their blood approves it. Above them the chant rose, guttural, rhythmic, syllables that scraped against the mind. The sigil pulsed, veins of crimson light spreading beneath the stone like roots. The ground trembled. We can't let it finish, Hermione said. We can't disrupt it directly, Draco countered. Not without triggering a cascade. The wards are layered. They'll absorb most spells, reflect others, and if we break it wrong, the ley lines could rupture. The explosion would take out half the coast. She exhaled sharply. Then we don't break it. We change it. He blinked. You can't just change a sigil this complex. One error, and... I'm not asking for your approval, Malfoy. I'm asking for your knowledge. Her voice was steel. You grew up with this. Your family's library. The forbidden sections. What do you know about inversion sigils? About counter-resonance? He studied her, rainwater, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Then slowly, he nodded. There's a principle, not taught, not written, called Star Vespran Reversal Star. It flips the core intent without breaking the structure. But it requires a conduit. A living anchor with enough magical resonance to override the ritual's claim. Her stomach dropped. You're saying someone has to stand in the center? Yes, and survive it. The chanting grew louder. The sigil flared, a pulse like a heartbeat. The air shimmered. Hermione stepped forward. No, Draco said, grabbing her arm. I'm the only one who can recalibrate the wards fast enough. You know that. And I'm the only one whose blood won't trigger a defensive purge. He looked at her, jaw tight. They'll let me pass. Their arrogance. They think they've won. that people like me still believe in their ideals. She searched his face. The boy who once sneered at her now stood drenched and determined, offering not redemption but sacrifice. "You step into that circle," she said, "and you might not walk out. I know." A long silence passed between them, filled only by thunder and the rising tide. "Then we do it together," she said. "You go in. I'll channel the reversal through the tablet. It's inscribed with an old countercharm, but I need you to hold the center, for as long as it takes." He nodded once. She pressed the slate into his hands. "Don't die, Malfoy." The ghost of a smirk. "Wouldn't dream of it, Granger." He moved before she could stop him. Swift, silent, slipping through the outer ring of rows. The chant faltered. One of the figures turned. She didn't wait. Kneeling, she placed her palms on the cold stone, closed her eyes, and began to speak. Not in Latin, not in English, but in the old tongue, the one she'd deciphered from fragments in the Department of Mysteries. The earth groaned. The sigil burned. Rain lashed against the cracked stained glass of the old apothecary in Nocturne Alley, the kind of downpour that turned cobblestones slick and shadows deeper than memory. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of dried belladonna and powdered moonstone, and the faint metallic tang of something older, something that didn't belong. A sigil glowed faintly on the floor, etched in ash and blood, its edges pulsing like a slow, sleeping heartbeat. At its center, a woman lay frozen, her hand outstretched, eyes wide and unseeing, encased in a shell of silvery black energy that shimmered like cooled iron. Hermione knelt just outside the perimeter, her fingers tracing the inverse pattern she'd sketched in chalk. "It's not just a binding," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "It's a conduit. They're not just trapping people. Something's being drawn star from star them." Draco stood a few paces behind, his wand poised, expression unreadable. "Your ministry aurors still don't understand that? They're too busy arresting Muggles for suspicious markings," she snapped, then exhaled sharply, closing her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "You're always sorry," he said, voice low, but never wrong. She glanced back at him, surprised by the lack of bite in the words. He wasn't smirking, wasn't even looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the sigil, calculating. "We need to reverse the flow," she said. "Break the siphon before we break the stasis. If we just shatter the shell, the backlash could kill her." "And you think you've mapped the counter-inscription?" he asked, stepping forward. "I think I have a theory," she corrected, "but it requires precision. One wrong stroke, and the entire thing could collapse inward. Take us with it." He crouched beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers. "Then let me draw it." Hermione stiffened. "You'd be trusting Star Me Star to guide you. And I'd be trusting Star You Star not to sabotage it." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Still think I'd sabotage a rescue mission, Granger?" "I think you've changed," she said carefully. "But not that much." He met her eyes then, gray like stormlight. "You're not the only one who spent the last decade trying to outrun their name." The silence between them stretched, fragile but not uncomfortable. Rain drummed against the glass. The sigil pulsed. "Start at the northern vertex," she said finally, voice steady. "Counterclockwise, 3 arcs, then a descending rune, like a serpent with its head turned back." Draco nodded, raising his wand. With deliberate motions he began to trace the reversal sigil in the air, each stroke leaving behind a faint trail of emerald light. Hermione watched, heart in her throat, correcting minutely. "A sharper angle there. Hold the final curve a second longer." The air began to hum. The iron shell around the woman flickered. "Now the incantation," Hermione whispered. Together, "Star revocare sangue, restitu animam." They spoke in unison, voices blending, hers firm with conviction, his low and resonant with old cadence. The sigil on the floor flared, not in anger, but in resistance, as if something deep beneath fought to maintain its hold. The woman gasped. Her body shuddered, the shell cracking like black ice. Tendrils of dark energy writhed upward, recoiling from the counter-sigil, seeking escape. Draco dropped his wand and seized Hermione's hand, interlacing their fingers without thought. "Now," he urged, "push it back." They channeled their magic, not as duelists, but as one, her relentless will, his ancestral precision, forcing the reversal through the breach. The dark energy shrieked, a sound felt more than heard, and then imploded into nothing. Silence. The woman lay breathing, weak but alive. The sigil on the floor crumbled to ash. Hermione pulled her hand back, suddenly aware of the warmth that had passed between them. Draco picked up his wand, dusted off his sleeve, and didn't look at her. "We got lucky," he said. "No," she replied, rising. "We got it right." He finally turned, eyes searching hers. "This is bigger than either of us thought. The families involved, they've been waiting for someone to notice." She nodded. "Then let them know we have." Outside, the rain began to ease. Somewhere in the city, another sigil was forming. But for the first time, someone was ready to break it. Rain lashed the cobblestones of Nocturne Helly like whips of cold glass, each drop sizzling as it struck the glowing sigil carved into the street. The symbol pulsed, once, twice, like a diseased heart buried beneath the stones. Hermione's breath came sharp and shallow, her fingers trembling as she traced the outer ring of the cursed mark. It wasn't just etched into the ground, it was star growing star. "It's feeding on the ley lines," Draco muttered, his voice low, his wand clenched so tightly, his knuckles were white. Someone tried to activate an old convergence point, without the counter runes. Idiot. It wasn't an accident, Hermione snapped. These sigils are appearing in London, Paris, Berlin, someone's star orchestrating star. This, a crack split the air. Not thunder, something deeper. The sky above them tore open like a wound, revealing a roiling mass of violet and silver light, raw magic, unbound, bleeding through the veil. The scent of ozone and burnt parchment filled the alley. Books in the nearby shop windows burst into flame without heat. A cat yowled and dissolved into shadow mid-leap. "We're too late," Draco breathed. "No," Hermione said, stepping forward. "We can still contain it. If we anchor the excess magic, redirect the surge." "With what?" "A quill in your lecture notes." She turned on him, eyes blazing. "With this star." She pulled a small leather-bound book from her robes. The Grimoire of Selwyn, stolen from Malfoy Manor archives 3 days prior. Draco's jaw tightened. "You stole a blood-bound text. It's not your star to keep hidden," she shot back. "And right now it's the only thing that might stop this city from being unmade." The sigil flared. The ground bucked. Hermione staggered, catching herself against a crumbly wall. The magic in the air was alive now, crawling up her arms like ivy, whispering in a language she almost understood. Old magic. Blood magic. The kind that remembered names. Draco moved suddenly, stepping into the center of the sigil, despite the heat rising from the stone. "We need a counter-activation," he said, voice steadying. "But it has to be balanced. Light and dark. Word and will. I'm not your dark half, Malfoy." "No," he said, glancing at her. Rain streaking his pale face. "But you're the only one here whose star thinks star like a pure blood without being one. That'll have to do." She didn't have time to retort. The rift above them widened. A sound like 1,000 bells shattering filled the air. Reality bent. Street lamps bent sideways. The houses groaned. Hermione opened the grimoire. The pages fluttered, ink rising like smoke. Words rearranged themselves before her eyes. Ancient syllables forming a binding chant. She didn't recognize the language, but her throat moved anyway. Syllables spilling out, cold, precise, star-hungry star. Draco began to chant too, a deeper counter-melody, his voice resonant with something older than house pride, something ancestral. The sigil responded. The light dimmed, pulsed, then surged toward them. Their voices rose together, clashing, then harmonizing. Magic spiraled between them, weaving a lattice of force above the sigil. Hermione could feel Draco's magic, cold and sharp, like winter steel, but not cruel. Controlled, disciplined, not what she'd expected. The rift shuddered. The wind stilled. Then, a single note, pure and clear, sang from the earth itself. The sigil cracked down the middle. Light collapsed inward. The sky sealed like a healing wound. Silence. Hermione dropped to her knees, gasping. The grimoire snapped shut in her hands. Draco stood over the broken sigil, breathing hard, his face unreadable. "That wasn't just a ritual," he whispered. "That was a star-summoned star." She looked up. "They weren't trying to trap people. They're waking something." and in the silence that followed, both knew. The real danger hadn't been averted. It had only just begun. The air inside the abandoned London warehouse hummed with latent tension, thick as oil and just as suffocating. Moonlight cut through broken skylights, painting silver streaks across cracked concrete, and the frozen form at the center of it all. A Muggle man, caught mid-step, his face locked in silent horror, encased in a lattice of glowing, iron-gray sigils that pulsed like a slow, alien heartbeat. Hermione knelt a few feet from the circle, her fingers tracing the outer edge of the glyph with careful precision, her breath shallow. The magic here wasn't just foreign. It felt old than, Hogwarts older than the Ministry itself, threaded through with something that made her bones ache. "It's a binding ligature," Draco murmured from behind her, his voice stripped of its usual sneer, replaced by something colder, more focused. "Not just immobilization, it's siphoning something, life force, magic. I'm not sure. But it's anchored in blood tradition. My grandmother used symbols like this in the family wards, though never this aggressive." Hermione glanced over her shoulder. Draco stood with his cloak drawn tight, wand in one hand, a leather-bound grimoire in the other, a Malfoy heirloom she knew. One the Ministry had only allowed him to bring under strict supervision. His pale hair caught the moonlight, his face drawn with concentration. They hadn't spoken more than necessary since arriving, but necessity was beginning to overwrite pride. "We need to disrupt the resonance," she said, standing. "If we reverse the flow, even slightly, it might release him. But we can't just blast it. This thing's layered. One wrong stroke, and we could collapse the containment inward. He'd be crushed." Draco exhaled sharply. "So we rewrite it." She turned fully, eyes narrowing. "Rewrite? That's not theory, Draco. That's high-level thaumaturgy. You'd need to understand the original caster's intent, the linguistic roots, the magical dialect. And you think I don't." He snapped, then paused, jaw tightening. "Look, I may not have spent my days buried in dusty Ministry archives, but I was taught this as a child, not for heroics, for survival, for power. But the knowledge is in my blood, literally." Hermione studied him. Not the boy she'd hated, not even the man he'd become, but the bridge he might be between two worlds of magic. She nodded once. "Then teach me, fast." They crouched opposite each other at the edge of the sigil, forming a crude triangle with the trapped man at its apex. Draco began sketching in the air with his wand, whispering in a dialect she barely recognized, a mix of ancient runes and old French incantations, the kind pure-blood families used when they didn't want Muggleborn's understanding. Hermione closed her eyes, letting the sounds wash over her, parsing phonetics, cross-referencing with forgotten texts in her mind. "It's a reversal loop," she breathed, "but inverted. If we mirror it, here, and channel counter-rooms through harmonic opposition, like a musical interval," Draco said, surprising her. "A fifth below. I've seen this in ward tuning." They looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Not trust, not yet, but alignment. "On 3, Hermione said. "No," Draco corrected. "On the same breath, we can't afford a delay. Our magic has to meet at the center." She swallowed, then nodded. They raised their wands together, not in confrontation, but in collaboration. Hermione began the counter-sequence, sharp, precise strokes in the air, etching glowing blue lines of correction into the fabric of the original sigil. Draco followed, not copying, but answering, his magic a deep, resonant gold that wove through hers like thread through fabric. The warehouse trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Their voices rose, not in harmony, but in star syncopation star. Hermione's clear and quick, Draco's low and deliberate. The sigil flared, the iron-gray light flickering, resisting. Then, together, they struck the final glyph, a spiraling rune of dissolution, drawn not with force, but with intent. The circle shattered like glass. The man collapsed forward, gasping, color flooding back into his skin. The sigils dissolved into ash, swirling in an unseen wind. Hermione lowered her wand, trembling. Draco sat back on his heels, breathing hard, his face pale but alive with something she'd never seen before. Not triumph, but wonder. "That shouldn't have worked," he said quietly. Hermione looked at their wands, still faintly glowing, their auras twined even now like vines. "It did," she whispered. "Because we weren't just fighting the magic. We understood it," he finished. And in that moment, standing in the wreckage of an ancient curse, they both knew the real mystery had only just begun. Rain fell over London in slow, steady sheets, blurring the edges of buildings and slicking the cobblestones with a sheen of silver. The city, both Muggle and magical, breathed again, tentatively, as if afraid the silence might shatter. In Diagon Alley, the chalk-white sigils that had once pulsed with eerie light were gone, their absence leaving only faint scorch marks on the stone, like scars from a fever dream. People moved through the streets with hunched shoulders, eyes darting, not quite believing it was over. Hermione stood outside the Ministry's auxiliary research chamber, a small, unmarked building tucked behind Gringotts, her fingers still smudged with ink from the final translation. The last of the incantations had been reversed at dawn. The trapped victims, over 60 across Britain, had stirred as one, blinking into consciousness with no memory of the weeks they'd lost. Healers said they'd be fine. No one believed that yet. A gust of wind tugged at her coat, and she pulled it tighter, watching the ministry carts haul away scrolls and shattered crystal phials. Evidence, relics, pieces of a puzzle that had nearly torn the world apart. She'd spent the last 3 days without sleep, arguing, researching, casting counterspells under the cold gaze of the Wizengamot's observers. And Draco had been there too. Always there. He emerged now from the chamber, his pale hair damp, his face unreadable. He carried a small black ledger bound in iron clasps. The Malfoy family grimoire finally surrendered. Not confiscated, given. "You look terrible," he said, stopping a few feet away. "And you look like you've been hexed 7 ways from Sunday," she replied, but there was no bite in it. Just exhaustion, and something else, something softer. He almost smiled. Almost. "They're calling it the awakening. The press, I mean. As if it were some noble revolution instead of a coordinated magical assault." "It almost was a revolution," she said quietly. "They weren't just extremists. They were heirs. Of the Greengrasses, the Selwyns, even a branch of the Pruitts. Families who believed the old pacts gave them the right to reclaim magical governance. And we proved they were based on lies," Draco said. "Half-truths, forgeries layered over real magic. My great-grandfather's head is in half those documents. He rewrote history to serve power." Hermione looked at him. "You didn't know?" "No," he said. "But I'm not surprised. We were taught loyalty above truth, blood above law. It took this," he gestured to the empty space where a sigil had burned into the wall, "to burn that rot out." A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but deep. The kind that comes after a storm, when the air is too clean for words. "They'll try to forget," she said. "The Ministry, the public. They'll call it an anomaly, a blip. They won't want to face what those blood pacts really meant, that for centuries power wasn't earned. It was stolen, hidden, passed down in whispers. And you'll make sure they don't forget," Draco said, watching her. She met his gaze. "Someone has to." He nodded, then reached into his coat and handed her the ledger. "Then you should have this. Everything's in there. The truth, the lies, the oaths broken and remade. I don't want it. Not anymore." She took it, the weight heavier than she expected. "Thank you." He turned to leave, then paused. "Granger, Hermione, if they ever try to build a new world on old chains, I won't stand with them." She watched him walk away, his silhouette fading into the rain, and for the first time in years she didn't see an enemy, or even just a reluctant ally. She saw a man who had chosen at last to be free. Rain lashed against the high-arched windows of the Wizengamot chamber, distorting the torchlight into trembling streaks across the stone walls. The air smelled of damp wool and old parchment, thick with tension. Hermione stood at the lectern, her fingers pressed flat against the carved oak, grounding herself. To her right, Draco Malfoy adjusted the cuff of his charcoal-gray robes, his expression carefully neutral, though she caught the faint tightening at the corner of his jaw. "The sigils," she began, voice steady, despite the weight in her chest, "are not dark magic in the sense we've been taught to fear. They are older, deeper. They operate on principles of binding and memory, of blood oaths sealed not by intent to harm, but by lineage and silence. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Elderly witches in towering hats exchanged glances. A few aurors near the back shifted, hands near their wands. Draco stepped forward, his voice cool, precise. The Malfoy family archives contain references to sigil wards dating back to the 12th century, used not for domination but for protection. Wards placed on ancestral lands, binding agreements between families during the Schism Wars. They were never meant to be weapons. Then why, interrupted Madame Edgecombe of the Magical Law Enforcement Squad, are they petrifying Muggles in London? Turning them into statues? That sounds like a weapon to me. Hermione exhaled slowly. Because they're being misread, the sigils are reacting to disruption. Someone is activating them without understanding the counter-inscriptions. It's like playing a symphony with half the sheet music. Draco added, and the Ministry's response, shutting down research into pre-war magic, banning even the study of certain runes, only ensures ignorance. We're not protecting anyone, we're making it worse. Silence followed. Then, from the upper tier, Augusta Longbottom rose, her silver hair pulled into a severe knot. You're asking us to trust traditions that bred blood supremacy. That allowed families like yours, Mr. Malfoy, to hoard knowledge while the rest of us followed ministry-approved doctrine. Draco didn't flinch. I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for honesty. The doctrine was curated, edited. The ministry rewrote magical history after the war to simplify the narrative. But the truth doesn't vanish just because it's inconvenient. Hermione turned to face the council. We've analyzed 17 sigil sites. 12 show traces of modified blood magic, not dark, but altered. Someone is tampering with ancient pacts, twisting them. And if we don't understand the original intent, we can't stop the spread. We need access to restricted archives. We need scholars from families like the Greengrasses, the Yaxleys. Yaxley? Barked a voice. You'd grant legitimacy to Death Eater bloodlines. No, Hermione said sharply. I'd grant legitimacy to knowledge. The sigils don't care about our politics. They respond to truth, to precision. And if we keep treating all old magic as inherently dangerous, we're playing into the hands of whoever is orchestrating this. She paused, glancing at Draco. He gave the faintest nod. There's a blood pact, she continued, mentioned in a fragment from the Prince lineage, Severus Snape's family. It speaks of a covenant between magical and non-magical blood, sealed before the International Statute of Secrecy. If that covenant is being broken, or awakened, then the sigils are to tax. They're warnings. A cold stillness settled over the room. Even the rain seemed to hush. Draco spoke softly now, almost reverently. My grandmother once told me that some magic doesn't live in wands. It lives in promises. And when those promises are forgotten, the magic doesn't die. It waits. Hermione looked out at the faces before them, suspicious, afraid, weary. We're not asking for permission to change history. We're asking for permission to understand it. Because if we don't, the next sigil might not just freeze a street. It might unravel everything. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the high windows of the Ministry's restricted archives, a soft percussion beneath the flicker of enchanted candles. The air smelled of old parchment, damp stone, and the faintest trace of bergamot from the tea Hermione had abandoned half an hour ago. She sat cross-legged on the floor, back against a towering shelf of Grimvors, a half-unfurled scroll of vellum spread across her lap. Her fingers traced the looping curves of a sigil, etched in iron-based ink, its edges shimmering faintly, like oil on water. Draco stood a few feet away, arms folded, his usual arrogance softened by the dim light. He wasn't looking at the scroll. He was watching her. You're missing the counterglyph, he said quietly. Not condescending, not mocking, just observant. Hermione exhaled through her nose. I see it. It's faint, almost erased. But it's there, beneath the third layer. Like it was meant to be hidden. He crouched beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed her arm. She didn't pull away. The Malfoys used something similar during the interregnum, he said. A ward against binding oaths. If someone swore falsely, the sigil would petrify them. Literally, turn their blood to slag. She turned to him, eyes sharp, and no one thought to mention this earlier. His jaw tightened. No one talks about the interregnum. It's not exactly something we put on ministry brochures. She studied his face, the faint scar along his temple, the shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. He looked tired. Not weak. Tired in the way of someone who'd spent too long carrying secrets he never asked for. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. He blinked, then looked away, running a hand through his hair. "Don't be. You didn't write the damn book." A silence settled, but it wasn't the brittle silence of old schoolyard grudges. It was heavier, fuller, like the quiet between thunderclaps. Hermione turned the scroll slightly, angling it toward the candlelight. "This isn't just a stasis sigil, it's a star filter star. It doesn't just freeze people, it reads them, their magic, their bloodline, their intentions." Draco went very still. "That's not possible, not without a soul anchor. Unless someone found a way around it," she whispered. "Or never stopped using it." Their eyes met. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. This wasn't dark magic. Not exactly. It was old magic. Older than Hogwarts, older than the Ministry. Magic that predated the statute of secrecy, when bloodlines ruled and power was measured in purity and ancient pacts. And Draco, whether he liked it or not, was one of the last living links to that world. "You knew," she said, voice low. "You knew this kind of thing existed." "Isar suspected Star," she corrected. He corrected. "My mother. She burned a box of my father's papers the night the war ended. I never knew why." "Not until now." Hermione's breath caught. "Do you think she knew about this? About the sigils?" "I think," he said slowly, "she feared what would happen if anyone found them again. Especially people like Star roll leaks. People from old families. People who still carry the marks," he said, rolling up his sleeve. On his forearm, faint but unmistakable, was a tracery of silver lines. Almost like veins. Almost like writing. "They're not tattoos. They're star-inherited star. Activated at puberty. My father called it the star Cantus Sanguinis star. Is this stuff. The blood song." Hermione reached out, then hesitated. "May I?" He nodded. Her fingers hovered just above the marks. They pulsed, once like a heartbeat. A shiver ran through her. "It's still alive," she whispered. "The magic, it's dormant, but it's star-listening star." Draco pulled his sleeve down, his expression unreadable. "Then we're not just hunting the sigils, Granger. We're being star-tested star." She looked at him. She looked at him. For the first time, didn't see the boy who'd called her a mudblood. She saw the man who'd stood silent in the great hall as his parents were questioned. The man who'd rebuilt his name from ash. The man who carried a legacy he never wanted but bore anyway. "We'll figure it out," she said. "Together." He met her gaze, and for a heartbeat something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not quite, but understanding, and something warmer, something neither of them was ready to name. Outside the rain fell harder, and deep beneath London, in the forgotten tunnels of the old wards, another sigil flared to life. The air in the Ministry's restricted archives was thick with the scent of aged parchment and cold iron, a metallic tang that clung to the back of Hermione's throat. Rows of towering, blackened bookshelves stretched into shadow, their spines etched with runes that pulsed faintly in the dim candlelight. She ran her fingers along the edge of a folio bound in what looked like dragonhide, its surface cool and strangely resistant to touch. The iron sigils, etched in blood, ash and forgotten tongues, had appeared without warning across London, Paris, even New York, freezing dozens in motion like statues caught mid-breath. Their eyes remained open, aware, pleading. No spell reversal had worked, no countercharm could touch them. And then there was Malfoy. She glanced over her shoulder. He stood near the southern alcove, one pale hand resting on a pedestal carved from obsidian, studying a sigil drawn in silver ink that shimmered like liquid mercury. His expression was unreadable, but his focus was absolute. She had expected arrogance, condescension, perhaps even sabotage. Instead, he'd arrived with a satchel of rare grimoires and quiet precision that unsettled her more than any insult could have. "You're certain this one originated from the Druish line?" she asked, careful to keep her voice neutral. He didn't look up. The Triskelion pattern at the base, 3 spirals converging inward. Only the Druish used that in binding sigils. They believed the spiral represented the soul's descent into matter. A pause. "They weren't wrong," Hermione frowned. "That's pure blood mysticism. There's no empirical evidence that—" "No," he cut in, turning at last, his gray eyes sharp. There's no Muggle star evidence, but magic doesn't always answer to logic, Granger. Sometimes it answers to blood. She stiffened. And you'd know, being steeped in all that ancestral nonsense. A faint smirk. I'd also know that dismissing it gets people killed. Like your Auror in Cardiff. Frozen mid-shout. Did you know his last word was star mother star? The words landed like a slap. She looked away, jaw tight. He wasn't wrong. The victims, Muggle and wizard alike, showed no pattern in bloodline, location, or behavior. Only the sigils connected them, each one unique but built on the same foundation. An inversion of the ancient star, vinculum vitae star, the life bond. These were anti-words, not protections. They severed the soul's tether to the body, leaving it trapped, conscious, unable to move or speak. Her fingers traced a diagram in the folio, 3 interlocking circles, each broken at one point. This symbol, it's not in any of the standard texts. It wouldn't be, Malfoy said, stepping beside her. His sleeve brushed hers, and she didn't pull away. The star, Tria Fracta star. The broken covenant. It was used during the schism of 1283, when the old families turned on each other after the International Statute of Secrecy was first proposed. They believed binding magic to secrecy was a betrayal of their oaths to the earth, to the old gods. Hermione exhaled slowly. So someone's tried to revive it, not just the magic, but the ideology. Or punish those they believe broke the pact, he murmured. And they're using blood to do it, not just any blood. Star unbroken star blood. That's why the sigils respond to pure light ancestry. Why I can read them. And you can't. She looked at him then, really looked. Not the boy who'd sneered at her in the corridors of Hogwarts. Not the man who'd once stood beside a dark lord. But someone burdened by a history he never asked for, yet couldn't escape. You hate this, don't you? The weight of it. His gaze dropped. Hate isn't strong enough, but it's mine to carry. Just as your faith in rules and progress is yours. Silence settled between them, not hostile, but fragile, like the space between two warring truces. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the silent prisoners frozen in its heart. And here, in the dim archive, 2 unlikely souls stood over the ashes of an old war, realizing the fire had never truly gone out. Hermione closed the folio. Then we find who's lighting the match. Malfoy nodded, and we'd burn it out, properly this time.